Our story tonight takes us to Narnia's eastern seas during Caspian's royal voyage. In the eastern waters of Narnia, during the reign of King Caspian, the Dawn Treader leaves the lone islands to search for 7 vanished lords. The voyage carries Edmund, Lucy, Eustace, Reapit Sheep, and the ship's company through unfamiliar kingdoms, enchanted islands, and the final light beyond the world. At the Scrubs house in England, during the school holidays, you stand before a framed painting of a ship beneath a quiet grey sky. The room is still, carrying the faint scent of polished wood, old books, and rain cooling against the window panes. Around you, Edmund and Lucy Pevensey stand close together, their familiar faces turned towards the painted sea, while Eustace Clarence Scrub remains a little apart, doubtful and watchful. Pale morning light rests upon the frame. Beyond the glass, the water appears calm, though the smallest painted wave seems to lean towards you. The room's silence gathers around the 3 children, soft as wool. Somewhere below, a clock measures the holiday morning with patient strokes. The boards beneath your feet feel firm and dry. Yet across the picture, a narrow line of foam shines with an almost liquid brightness, and the ship's dark timbers seem to carry the faint smell of tar, rope, and distant salt. You are looking at the Dawn Treader, a Narnian ship painted beneath full canvas, with her bow pointed towards an eastern horizon no English artist could have known. Edmund and Lucy have travelled to Narnia before, and the familiar shape of that vessel stirs a quiet recognition within them. Eustace, however, is a newcomer, and his expression holds more irritation than wonder as he studies the framed picture. The ship seems too small for the wide sea around it, yet every detail has been carefully painted. You can see sailors near the mast, a raised deck at the stern, and a long pennant lifting into the wind. The water is coloured in layers of blue, green, and silver. Each wave possesses a thin white edge. The sky opens beyond the ship in a pale band of light. Nothing moves in the room. Still, the painted canvas seems to breathe with the slow rhythm of a living sea, while cool air gathers around your hands and the scent of rain mingles with the imagined fragrance of tarred rope. The first movement is scarcely more than a tremor, a slight trembling along the painted surface where the waves meet the hull. Lucy sees it clearly. Edmund notices a moment later. Eustace dismisses the change as a trick of light, although the water continues to rise and fall within the frame. The Dawn Treader lifts upon a painted swell. Her ropes strain. Her canvas bellies softly. A tiny line of foam slides along the side of the ship and disappears beneath the frame. You remain before the picture as the impossible scene becomes more precise. The water darkens near the foreground. The waves gather depth. The painted horizon shifts farther away, and a wind that cannot belong to the quiet English room brushes your face. Lucy reaches towards the frame. Edmund moves nearer. Eustace turns, perhaps searching for an ordinary explanation, while the Dawn Treader sails steadily towards you. The surface of the painting has lost the hard shine of varnish, becoming cool and yielding beneath your fingers. The framed sea feels damp, like water held beneath a winter sky. A faint chill travels from the canvas into your hand. The room behind you remains warm, but the air before the picture grows sharp with salt. You hear the delicate slap of waves against wood, followed by the whisper of canvas moving overhead. Painted light trembles over the floorboards. The smell of wet timber becomes stronger, joined by tar, hemp, and the clean mineral scent of the open ocean. Lucy's sleeve brushes against yours. Edmund's hand catches the edge of the frame. Eustace's voice rises briefly, then fades beneath a low, rushing sound. The picture widens before your eyes. The dark hull leans close. Water gleams where no water should be. The cold, painted surface gives way with a sudden softness, and the English room vanishes behind a wall of blue. You are falling through the frame, with Edmund and Lucy beside you and Eustace close behind, all 4 of you dropping into cold, salt water. The shock is immediate and complete. Seawater closes over your head, enters your ears, and presses coldly against your skin. Salt touches your lips. Your clothes become heavy. Light breaks above you into wavering strips of silver, while the sound of the sea surrounds every breath. Edmund reaches for Lucy. Lucy finds the sleeve of Eustace's coat. You rise together, breaking the surface beneath a wide, pale morning sky. The English room is gone. The framed painting has become real seawater, stretching in every direction beneath your arms. Waves lift you and lower you again. Your heart beats quickly in the cold. A fragment of painted blue seems still to cling to the air, dissolving like mist. Then the sea opens before you, and a vessel appears beyond the swell, carrying the bright flag of Narnia. The Dawn Treader rises above the water on her dark wooden sides, her masts creaking beneath a steadily rising swell. You see sailors leaning over the rail, their hands reaching down with ropes and lines. The vessel is larger than the painting suggested, though still narrow enough to move swiftly through the waves. Her working decks are crowded with practical things. Coils of wet rope lie beneath the rails. Barrels are secured near the mast. Oars, spare canvas, casks, baskets, and wooden chests occupy every clear space. Along the sides, weapons rest beneath coverings, ready for use. The ship smells of wet timber, tarred rope, salt, and canvas. Men call across the water as the Dawn Treader turns carefully towards you. The pale morning light spreads over the deck. Her sails snap softly in the wind. Beneath the stern, the sea breaks into long white folds, and the ship's movement carries the calm purpose of a creature accustomed to difficult waters. A rope reaches you first, and Edmund grips it while sailors pull Lucy towards the ship's side. You feel the rough fibers cutting gently into your palms as the line tightens. One sailor bends low, another braces himself against the rail, and together they haul you upwards through the cold spray. Lucy is lifted over the side. Edmund follows. Eustace comes last, coughing and angry, his spectacles absent and his clothing dripping across the planks. You lie upon the deck while seawater runs beneath you in narrow streams. The timber feels hard, solid, and reassuring beneath your hands. Around you, the crew moves with trained efficiency. A sailor brings a blanket. Another checks the ropes. An officer calls instructions towards the mast. The Dawn Treader rolls beneath your body, and the creak of her timbers seems almost human. Above, canvas snaps softly in the wind, while the eastern sea opens in every direction beneath the pale morning light. You are aboard the Dawn Treader, and the man approaching across the deck is King Caspian, traveling east from Narnia. His clothing is practical for the sea, though the manner of his bearing remains unmistakably royal. A sword hangs at his side. Wind has touched his dark hair, and salt has gathered along the edge of his cloak. Beside him walks the ship's captain, Drinian, a steady and experienced officer whose attention moves constantly between the rescued children, the rigging, and the changing water. Caspian looks first towards Lucy and Edmund, recognizing them from earlier journeys. Then his gaze rests upon Eustace, whose name and presence are unfamiliar. The crew lowers their voices around the king. Near the mast, a small figure watches with bright, unblinking interest. Reapit Sheep, a talking mouse and skilled swordsman, stands with one paw upon the hilt of his little rapier. The Dawn Treader rises beneath you as the captain waits for orders. The deck is warm where the morning light reaches it, but cold seawater still runs from your sleeves and gathers beside the scuppers. Wet timber gives off a deep, resinous smell, mixed with tarred rope and the faint sweetness of stored grain. The planks are scored by years of boots, barrels, and rough weather. Every movement of the ship travels upwards through them. The mast leans slightly, then returns. The ropes creak in their blocks. Canvas lifts overhead and snaps softly before settling into its shape. Somewhere beneath the deck, water murmurs against the hull. Nearby, a sailor coils a line with practiced hands. Another opens a wooden chest containing folded blankets, dried clothing, and small tins of food. The sea has a color, unlike the painted water in England. It is deeper, heavier, and alive with changing shades. Sunlight touches the crests in pale fragments. Spray gathers on the rail. Salt remains on your lips as the wind moves coolly across your face. Caspian tells you that the Dawn Treader has sailed east in search of 7 Narnian lords who disappeared years earlier. Those 7 lords had been sent from Narnia to explore the seas beyond the kingdom, where the maps became uncertain and the familiar coastlines fell away. They had gone east under royal authority, carrying provisions, weapons, letters, and the hope of discovering what lay beyond known waters. The years passed without their return. Rumors traveled back in fragments. Some spoke of distant islands. Others mentioned strange shores, unfamiliar stars, and waters where no ordinary ship could remain. Caspian has taken the matter upon himself. His voyage is a royal duty, but it is also a rescue mission, an exploration, and a search for the edges of the world. As he speaks, Drinian studies the horizon. Around you, the crew continues its work. The Dawn Treader moves eastward, carrying the king towards the missing lords. The name of Narnia rests gently among the sounds of the ship, carried through the rigging with the smell of salt and sun-warmed rope. Lucy listens with quiet attention, her wet hair drying in the wind. Edmund asks careful questions about the 7 lords and the waters they cross. Eustace remains unconvinced, although the soaked state of his clothes offers little support for ordinary explanations. Caspian answers without impatience. He speaks of Narnia's forests, castles, rivers, and northern roads, while the sea rolls beneath the Dawn Treader. You can hear the separate sounds of the vessel working around you. A block knocks against wood. A rope tightens. A barrel shifts and is secured. The ship's officers confer beside the mast. Pale light spreads across the deck, turning wet planks to bronze. Beyond the rail, waves open and close in slow succession, carrying the Dawn Treader east beneath a widening sky. Drinian is the captain of the Dawn Treader, and his calm movements reveal how carefully the vessel has been prepared for the eastern voyage. He checks the wind, watches the sails, and listens to reports from the sailors stationed forward. The crew has stores enough for a long journey. Barrels of water stand beneath the deck. Grain, dried meat, fruit, and salted fish are packed in orderly spaces. Spare rope and canvas are protected from rain. Tools, lanterns, medicines, and cooking vessels have their assigned places. Weapons are kept ready, because unknown waters may bring danger from shore or sea. The Dawn Treader is not merely a painted emblem or a royal ornament. She is a working sailing vessel, shaped by shipwrights, maintained by officers, and trusted by men who understand weather. When Drinian gives an order, it travels cleanly across the deck. Canvas answers. Timber groans. The ship gathers speed. Reapit sheep comes nearer, small enough to stand upon the raised rim of a coil of rope, with his rapier shining beneath the morning light. His fur is neat despite the wet air, and his clothing has been made with the care given to a noble traveller. He speaks of the eastern sea with bright determination, as though every mile beyond Narnia brings him closer to a promise already held in his heart. Reapit sheep is a talking mouse, but no ordinary passenger. He is a skilled swordsman, a courteous companion, and one of the expedition's most eager spirits. His purpose reaches beyond the recovery of the 7 lords. He hopes to sail east until the sea itself changes, until the Dawn Treader reaches the world's end. His little sword rests at his side. His voice remains clear above the wind. The crew smiles when he speaks, though no one doubts the seriousness of his resolve. Around Reapit sheep, the deck carries 100 softened textures, each one altered by water, wind, and the steady motion of the ship. The rope beneath his feet is coarse and dark with tar. The mast rises above you, grooved by hands and weather. Wooden pegs hold the rigging in place. The deck shifts beneath your soles as the Dawn Treader climbs another swell. Canvas moves overhead with a broad, gentle sound, snapping softly whenever the wind strengthens. Salt spray touches the rails and leaves tiny crystals upon the polished metal fittings. The morning is not bright in the English sense. It is wide and pearly, with clouds thinning above the eastern sea. Sunlight crosses the deck in long, pale bands. A gull circles once beyond the stern, then disappears into the distance. The vessel smells of timber, tar, wet wool, and the faint smoke rising from the galley. Caspian explains that the 7 lords were not lost through carelessness, but through the danger and uncertainty of the seas beyond Narnia. Their expedition had begun with confidence. They carried royal instructions and the authority of the throne. They had sailed beyond familiar harbors, past islands known to fishermen, and into waters marked only by guesswork. Each lord had been chosen for courage, knowledge, or experience, yet the Eastern Ocean offered no promise of safe return. Winds changed without warning. Currents carried vessels away from their intended course. Shores appeared where maps showed nothing, and vanished again beneath morning mist. Caspian believes that some trace of the lords may still remain. He has gathered the Dawn Treader, the crew, the officers, and every useful store that Narnia could provide. The Voyage now belongs to all of them. It moves east under duty, hope, and the quiet discipline of a ship at sea. The names of Caspian, Drinian, and Reepicheep settle into the scene, joined by the remembered names of Edmund, Lucy, Eustace, and Narnia. Lucy stands near the king, familiar with the strangeness of this world, and gentle in the presence of its people. Edmund watches the horizon with the alertness of someone who has crossed it before. Eustace keeps his arms close to his body, still trying to arrange the impossible into sensible explanations. Caspian speaks to them as companions rather than prisoners. Drinian returns to the quarterdeck. Reepicheep remains beside the rigging, looking east. The Dawn Treader continues beneath the pale morning light. Every figure aboard has a different reason for being there. Caspian carries the responsibility of a king. Drinian carries the safety of the ship. Reepicheep carries a bright private hope. The Pevensies carry memory. Eustace carries disbelief. All of you are carried by the sea. Below the deck, the Dawn Treader holds its stores in dim, orderly spaces where the smell of wood becomes deeper and more enclosed. Barrels rest in wooden cradles. Sacks of grain hang from beams. Coils of rope are tucked against the walls. Lanterns sway gently with the ship, casting small golden movements across the planks. A chest contains spare clothing for the rescued children. Another holds charts, instruments, and letters bearing the seal of Narnia. There are casks of oil, bundles of kindling, jars of preserved fruit, and tools for repairing a mast or a damaged rail. The vessel creaks around you with the patient sounds of strain. Above, boots cross the deck. Water touches the hull in long, rhythmic strokes. The air is warmer below, touched by tar, wool, salt meat, and candle smoke. Then the ship rises sharply, and every lantern swings together before becoming still. Caspian's promise is not simply to discover distant lands, but to find the missing lords if they remain somewhere beneath the eastern sky. You hear the resolve in his voice when he speaks their names. They had been sent east years before, and their absence has remained an open place within Narnian memory. A king may inherit a crown, a castle, and a kingdom, but he also inherits unfinished duties. Caspian has chosen to follow the Lord's path across the sea. If they are imprisoned, he intends to bring them home. If they are stranded, he intends to reach them. If they have passed beyond the known world, he intends at least to discover where their journey ended. Drinian accepts this purpose with the seriousness of a captain. The crew has accepted it through labor. Reepicheep accepts it with shining certainty. The Dawn Treader carries all these intentions eastward. A cool wind moves over the deck, drying the children's clothes while the ship turns slowly upon the long swell. You feel the warmth of the sun returning to your hands. The salt on your lips remains sharp. Near the rail, droplets gather and slide between the boards. The ship's shadow moves across the water beneath you. Her canvas fills more fully, and the lines draw taut with a soft humming vibration. The masts creak under the rising swell, bending slightly against the weight of the wind. Drinian speaks with the helmsman. A sailor climbs the rigging with unhurried confidence. Another checks a tied bundle of canvas. The Dawn Treader gives a deep wooden shudder and begins to settle into a faster rhythm. Behind her, the water breaks into a pale trail. Ahead, the horizon waits beneath a thin veil of cloud, calm and distant as a thought not yet finished. Reapit Sheep tells you that the eastern journey may reach the world's end, and his confidence makes the most distant possibility seem quietly near. He does not speak of the world's end as a place of darkness or terror. To him, it is an invitation carried beyond the final line upon a map. He imagines the sea becoming brighter, the air becoming clearer, and the Dawn Treader sailing towards a country where the sun rises close to the water. His rapier glints whenever he moves. His small paws rest upon the rail. He speaks with courtesy, but nothing in his manner suggests hesitation. Caspian listens. Lucy smiles. Edmund looks towards the horizon. Even Eustace, despite himself, follows Reapit Sheep's gaze. The Seven Lords lie somewhere behind this purpose, and the world's end lies beyond it. Between them stretches the Eastern Sea, broad enough to contain duty, rescue, exploration, and hope. The ship continues beneath a sky of pale blue and silver, while the wet timber slowly loses its darkness in the growing light. Canvas snaps softly overhead. The sound repeats in changing rhythms, never quite the same twice. Water brushes the hull. Ropes draw across wooden fittings. A loose chain taps against a post, then becomes quiet when a sailor catches it. The deck smells cleaner now, washed by spray and sunlight. On the horizon, clouds open into long strips of brightness. The waves are no longer painted, yet they retain something of the picture's beauty. Green shadows move beneath their surfaces. White foam folds and dissolves. Your clothing dries against your skin. The blanket around your shoulders is rough and warm. Caspian's voice fades into conversation with Drinian. Reapit Sheep's figure remains small against the wide sea. The Dawn Treader rises and falls with steady grace. Drinian gives the order, and the Dawn Treader turns towards the eastern horizon where the sea and sky meet in one quiet line. The change is gradual. The bow moves first. The sails draw differently. Ropes tighten, and the masts creak beneath the altered pressure. The deck inclines gently beneath your feet. Behind you, the course from England, from the picture, and from the familiar world falls away into widening water. Ahead lies Narnia's eastern sea, carrying the memory of 7 vanished lords and the promise of whatever waits beyond them. Caspian stands beneath the royal standard. Edmund and Lucy remain together near the rail. Eustace looks forward in silence. Reapit Sheep faces the sunrise with one paw resting upon his sword. Drinian watches the vessel answer the wind. The Dawn Treader gathers her strength and moves east. The morning settles softly upon the deck, touching every rope, barrel, sail, and weathered plank with a thin wash of gold. The sea is calmer now, and the ship's movement becomes familiar, up and down, forward and east. Salt rests lightly upon your lips. The wind passes over your face and leaves no chill behind. Around you the crew works quietly, their footsteps slow upon the timber. The canvas moves overhead. The masts creak. The Dawn Treader breathes through her ropes and sails. Beyond the rail, the horizon remains open. The world is wide and quiet. Caspian's ship moves towards the light, and the eastern sea carries her onward. You are standing at the forward rail as the first pale light gathers above the eastern water, and the Dawn Treader turns towards the lone islands. Behind you, the ship rises and settles upon the long Caspian swell, carrying its small company beyond Narnia's familiar shores. The sea is mild beneath the morning, coloured silver near the horizon and deep blue beneath the ship. Warm harbour air has not yet reached you, but the wind already carries a softer fragrance than the open ocean. Around the masts, ropes move gently through their blocks, and the canvas gives a low, patient sound as it gathers the eastern breeze. Caspian stands near the helm, quiet beneath his dark cloak, watching the distant line of land. The sailors speak in subdued voices, naming the islands as they come into view. The lone islands are not strangers to Narnia, although they lie far from Cair Paravel and beyond the waters most commonly crossed by Narnian ships. Their allegiance is older than the present voyage, and their connection with Narnia is written into the history of kings, treaties, and forgotten expeditions. The islands appear gradually, first as low shadows beneath the rising sun, then as green ridges and pale cliffs surrounded by warm, shining water. You see no great mountains, no towers bright enough to command the horizon, and no walls like those guarding Narnia's older cities. Instead, the land seems scattered and peaceful, with wooded slopes descending towards coves and narrow harbors. The dawn treader moves between darker patches where submerged rocks rest beneath the surface. Oars knock softly against the ship's side as smaller boats approach, carrying fishermen, pilots, and merchants from the nearest settlement. Their voices drift across the water in several accents, and the island customs seem to meet one another upon the waves. Some boats bear signs of Narnian trade, while others carry unfamiliar colors and carved figures belonging to older local traditions. The Eastern Sea contains many settlements, each holding different loyalties, memories, and ways of arranging daily life. The lone islands are one part of that wider world. You enter the harbor beneath a sky already bright with warmth, while the dawn treader passes between stone quays crowded with carts, baskets, ropes, and barrels. Market voices drift over the harbor, rising and falling above the splash of water against the piers. The air feels thick with sun, salt, fish, dust, and the resinous smell of pitch spread across newly repaired hulls. Coarse sacks of grain are stacked beneath awnings, and baskets of dried fruit rest in the shade beside jars of oil. Porters move slowly under their loads, their sandals scraping over pale stones worn smooth by many seasons. A bell sounds somewhere beyond the market, its tone softened by the buildings and bright air. You feel the warmth against your face as the ship's ropes are thrown ashore. The timbers creak beneath your feet, and the familiar odor of rope, tar, and packed provisions rises from the deck. For a little while, the harbor seems to offer only rest, trade, and the ordinary order of a settled coast. The first greetings are formal, yet they do not carry the ease expected between a kingdom and its dependent islands. Officials come aboard in embroidered garments, accompanied by guards whose expressions remain fixed and watchful. They speak of taxes, permits, and the governor's authority, giving little attention to Caspian's title as King of Narnia. The royal seal is examined, questioned, and finally accepted with a reluctance that leaves the deck strangely quiet. You stand close enough to hear the island officials debating the rights of the visiting ship. Their words suggest that Narnian protection has become distant, while local power has grown immediate and severe. The lone islands are politically connected with Narnia, but that connection has been weakened by neglect and exploited by men who understand authority as a means of personal gain. Caspian listens without anger. His face remains calm, although the stillness around his eyes shows that he understands the danger. The voyage has begun to reveal why the eastern seas matter to Narnia. People live there beneath the shadow of Narnian law. You leave the ship and walk along the harbor beside Caspian, where the brightness of the water reaches between the buildings in narrow, trembling paths. Vendors call from shaded stalls, and market voices continue over the stone quays like a slow tide. Beneath one awning, dried fruit is arranged in shallow wooden trays, its color deepened by the shade. Nearby, coarse grain sacks lean against a wall marked with old painted symbols. The sun touches the upper edges of the roofs, while the lower streets remain cool and dusty. You hear rope sliding through a pulley, a donkey breathing beside a cart, and the small knock of oars against a mud boat. The smell of pitch and tar mingles with crushed herbs, warm stone, and the faint sweetness of dates. Nothing in the harbour is hurried, yet nothing seems free from supervision. Guards watch the movement of labourers. Clerks record goods entering the island. A child pauses beside a doorway, then slips away when an armed man turns his head. The governor receives Caspian inside a fortified house above the harbour, where thick walls keep out much of the heat. He is a man who has learned to make official language serve private purposes. His robes display the symbols of office, and his attendants repeat his claims with practiced obedience. He speaks of order, efficiency, and the need for the islands to manage their own affairs. Yet behind these phrases lies a system in which the weak can be seized, sold, and transported without lawful protection. The island government has allowed abuses connected with slavery and forced sale, while the governor has treated complaints as interruptions to trade. Families have been separated by contracts they did not freely sign. Labourers have been taken from their homes under debts invented or enlarged by officials. The governor insists that such matters belong to island custom, although his own power depends upon the profits they bring. Caspian hears the explanation to its end. Then he asks whether the law of Narnia protects only those who live near the royal castle. The question settles over the chamber, and the governor's confidence becomes less complete. Caspian's authority does not rest upon the distance between Cair Paravel and the lone islands. It rests upon the promise that Narnian power will not be used merely as a name upon old documents. The king has sailed east in search of the 7 missing lords, but that search cannot be separated from the lives of the people whose shores he reaches. The voyage is not merely a search for islands on a map, nor an adventure conducted beyond ordinary responsibility. Each harbour reveals some part of the older Narnian expansion, when ships, envoys, and settlers carried the kingdom's influence beyond its central forests and rivers. The memory of that expansion remains in titles, customs, and loyalties, even where the people have been left without effective protection. Caspian must therefore decide what his kingship requires. The answer cannot be found in ceremony alone. It must be measured by the treatment of those who possess no title with which to defend themselves. You return towards the lower harbour as afternoon settles upon the island, and the streets gather the golden heaviness of later sunlight. The market is quieter now, though voices still travel over the stone quays from shaded passages and open courtyards. A cooper taps a hoop into place, each measured strike carrying across the warm air. Grain dust lies upon the ground beside the sacks, and dried fruit gives off a faint, honeyed scent where a basket has been opened. The stone beneath your hand is rough in places and polished in others, shaped by carts, feet, rain, and years of trade. Warm harbour air moves inland from the bright water. Its saltiness is softened by pitch, rope, old wood, and packed provisions. Small boats rise and fall against the quay. Their oars knock gently against their sides, making a hollow sound that continues even when the harbour voices fall silent. Caspian's search changes when a name is brought quietly to him, one spoken with caution among the island people. Lord Byrne is living among them. He was one of the 7 missing lords, companions of Caspian's uncle, King Caspian IX, who had sailed east and never returned. For years, the lost lords have existed in Narnia's imagination as figures suspended between history and uncertainty. Their absence helped set the course of Caspian's voyage, for the king had promised to discover what became of them. Now, on the lone islands, that promise takes human shape. Byrne is not found seated in a palace or governing from a decorated hall. He is discovered among ordinary people, known to them by his conduct rather than by the splendor of his title. Time has altered his appearance, but the signs of Narnian nobility remain in his bearing and speech. When Caspian meets him, the search becomes a meeting between 2 duties separated by years. You are near the harbour when Byrne comes into the sunlight, and you see a man whose clothing has been worn by labour, travel, and island weather. The warmth has darkened his face, while fine lines have gathered around his eyes. He carries no visible emblem of rank. His hands are marked by the practical work of a settled life, and the people near him greet him with the quiet respect given to someone who has shared their difficulties. Behind Byrne, the harbour slopes towards the market, where coarse sacks of grain are being moved beneath a canvas roof. The smell of rope, pitch, dried fruit, and sun-warmed timber rests heavily in the air. Somewhere above the houses, a bell begins to ring, its sound passing through the brightness and fading among the roofs. You hear water touching the stone below the quay, then the creak of a cart turning slowly in a narrow lane. Byrne's presence does not make the island seem more splendid. It makes its neglected history feel close enough to touch. Byrne tells Caspian that the island government has long been separated from the people it claims to serve. The governor holds Narnian authority as a shield, while ignoring the laws that should give that authority meaning. Byrne has seen the forced sale of islanders and listened to families whose lives were broken by official decisions. He has remained among the people because he could not accept the safety of a hidden name while others suffered openly. Yet he has not possessed the power to remove the governor. His influence has been moral and personal, while the machinery of government has remained in the hands of men who profit from injustice. Caspian understands that Byrne's years among the islanders have given him knowledge no distant official could possess. The missing lord has learned the customs of the settlements, the loyalties of their households, and the quiet fears that pass through the market after sunset. His return to Narnian history is therefore also a return to public responsibility. The governor is summoned before Caspian, Byrne, and representatives of the island communities. Evening approaches, and the harbour light has begun to soften upon the water. The governor arrives surrounded by guards, but their certainty has diminished. The king's ship lies in the harbour, and the people have learned that the missing lord stands beside Caspian. Testimony is offered concerning imprisonment, forced sale, confiscated goods, and the use of Narnian authority to silence resistance. The governor answers with technical arguments, claiming that contracts have been honoured and local custom preserved. Caspian asks who wrote the contracts, who witnessed them, and whether the people being sold were free to refuse. No answer satisfies the room. The decision is made without spectacle. Caspian intervenes against the governor's rule, removes him from power, and orders that the offices supporting the abuses be placed under lawful supervision. The island government cannot continue as before simply because its documents bear an old Narnian seal. Night gathers gently across the harbour, while the change of power moves through the streets in murmurs rather than shouts. Lamps are lit beneath covered stalls, and their reflections tremble in the darkened water. You smell pitch cooling on the hulls, rope dampened by evening air, and the dry sweetness of fruit stored for the next day's trade. The stone quays retain the day's warmth beneath your feet, although the upper air has become softer. Crates are closed, shutters are drawn, and the last carts pass slowly towards the inland roads. From a nearby boat comes the sound of an oar being lifted and laid across its supports. A second vessel answers with a muted knock, and then the harbour settles again. Above the roofs, evening bells begin to fade behind the ship. Their distant notes move across the dark water, becoming thinner until only the quiet wash against the quay remains. The lone islands are still the same islands, yet the night now carries a different expectation. Caspian appoints Lord Byrne as Duke of the Lone Islands, restoring to the island government a title with both ancient dignity and immediate practical weight. The appointment is not a reward for having been found, and Byrne does not receive it as an ornament. He accepts responsibility for restoring lawful government among the islands. The Duke must rebuild trust where the governor has used fear. He must examine offices, release those held without lawful cause, and establish rules protecting people from forced sale. He must also balance the varied customs of the settlements, for the islands do not form a single community in every habit or loyalty. Some islanders look towards Narnia with affection, while others remember distant officials, chiefly through taxes and demands. Bern's authority will depend upon patient work among these differences. Caspian gives him the dukedom because the islands require someone who knows their people, not because a title alone can repair a government damaged by neglect. Morning returns with clear light along the harbour, and the dawn treader begins the calm work of preparing for departure. You stand beside the ship as provisions come aboard in steady, careful loads. Coarse sacks of grain pass from shoulder to shoulder. Dried fruit is packed into smaller containers and secured beneath the deck. Barrels of water are rolled across the stone quay, while bundles of rope, jars of oil, and sealed parcels of preserved food are checked against the ship's needs. The smell of pitch and fresh cordage mingles with the warm harbour air. Sunlit water flickers between the boats, and market voices drift across the quays with less tension than before. Oars knock against the ship's side as the tide moves gently beneath the hull. No one treats the resupply as an interruption to the voyage. The crew understands that a ship traveling east must depend upon the settlements it meets, and that peaceful provisions are part of the work of kings and sailors alike. The political settlement changes the meaning of Caspian's expedition. He has found Lord Bern, but the discovery does not allow him to abandon his duties of government. The king has had to judge a governor, protect island people, and appoint a ruler capable of carrying the work forward. Adventure and government have become inseparable aboard the Dawn Treader. The search for the missing lords began with the memory of Narnian expansion, yet that memory is no longer a distant tale of ships and noble companions. It now includes the living communities of the Eastern Sea, each connected to Narnia by promises that must be renewed through action. Caspian learns that a king may sail towards unknown waters while remaining answerable for familiar laws. His authority depends upon protecting people beyond his immediate kingdom, even when they live among customs he does not fully share. The lone islands have given his voyage a political depth that no map could show. You walk once more through the harbour before the ship leaves, passing stalls where morning trade has begun beneath strips of woven shade. Fish scales shine on wooden boards, and baskets of figs rest beside folded cloth. The stone quays are warm under the sun, but the narrow lanes preserve coolness from the night. Around you, merchants speak of prices, weather, distant ports, and the appointment of the new duke. Their voices overlap without becoming loud, as though the island itself is waking slowly from a troubled dream. A porter carries grain towards the water, his steps measured beneath the weight. Nearby, a sailor winds a length of rope around a wooden post, the fibers rasping against his hands. The harbour air carries salt, dust, pitch, and the clean scent of water disturbed by oars. At the edge of the quay, the Dawn Treader waits with her sails gathered, provisions secured, and dark hull reflected beneath her. Bern comes aboard before the final lines are cast off, and he stands with Caspian near the quarterdeck while the sailors complete their preparations. He has accepted the dukedom, but the official title already appears smaller than the burden attached to it. Duke of the Lone Islands is a phrase capable of being written in a record, spoken in a court, or stamped upon a seal. Restoring lawful government will require more than any phrase can express. It will require hearings, journeys, repairs, agreements, and the patient removal of practices made ordinary through repetition. The contrast between official titles and the practical burdens of rule is visible in Bern's quiet face. He is found among the people, elevated by Caspian, and immediately returned to the work of serving them. Caspian watches him with an understanding that has grown during the settlement. A crown gives shape to responsibility, but it does not make responsibility lighter. By midday, the last provisions are secured, the harbour officials have withdrawn, and the crew prepares to move the Dawn Treader into deeper water. You hear the first orders carried along the deck, followed by the creak of blocks as the sails rise. Warm light rests upon the ropes and rails. Grain sacks settle into their places below, and the fragrance of dried fruit lingers near the open stores. The ship's side receives the familiar knocking of oars as the harbour boat pulls them clear of the quay. Behind you, the market grows smaller, its voices blending with gulls, carts, bells, and the faint ringing of tools. Lord Byrne remains upon the island, standing beneath the new responsibility of the dukedom. Caspian gives him a final greeting, and the distance between king and duke begins to widen as the current catches the ship. The lone islands remain politically connected with Narnia, but their future will now depend upon the steady work of a ruler who knows the cost of neglect. You watch the island harbour recede, while the Dawn Treader turns eastward once more, leaving the quays, markets, and settled waters behind. The sun lies in a broad path across the sea, and the ship glides through its brightness with a slow, unhurried motion. From the shore, the evening bells are not yet sounding, but their towers remain visible above the clustered roofs. The last harbour voices reach you as softened fragments, carried over water, and then lost beneath the creaking of the sails. Rope smells rise from the deck, mingled with pitch, salt, and the dry scent of newly packed provisions. Oars knock once against the hull and then fall quiet. The islands become a chain of green and gold beneath the western light. You feel the warmth of the day upon the rail, while the eastern wind moves steadily across your face. For a time, civilization follows the ship in small signs rather than visible buildings. A gull turns above the wake. A floating fragment of wood passes beneath the stern. The faint odor of smoke comes from some unseen settlement and fades into the open air. Then even these traces disappear, and the sea expands around you. Caspian stands near the stern, looking back towards the lone islands and towards the course ahead. His promise to find the missing lords has already brought him to Byrne, but the search continues beyond the island chain. Less familiar waters wait to the east, carrying settlements whose customs, loyalties, and histories may differ from those of Narnia and the lone islands. The Dawn Treader has replenished her supplies, and the crew has received enough provisions for the next stage. Yet the ship carries more than grain, water, rope, and dried fruit. It carries the knowledge that every distant shore may contain a duty. Evening settles over the departing vessel, and the water changes from gold to a deep color beneath the widening sky. The sails become pale shapes against the dusk, while the mast and rigging form slender lines above you. The deck feels firm underfoot, though the sea continues its patient rising and falling. Around the hatchways, the crew moves quietly, checking knots, covering stores, and securing loose objects that might shift during the night. The smell of pitch and rope remains close, warmed by the day and cooled by the breeze. Far behind, the bells of the lone islands begin to ring. Their notes reach the Dawn Treader faintly, each one dissolving into the distance before another arrives. You stand beside the rail as the final sound fades behind the vessel. The island is no longer visible, but its lesson remains with Caspian and the ship. The Eastern Voyage now carries a fuller meaning. The 7 missing lords are not merely names attached to an old mystery, and the lone islands are not merely a first destination marked upon a chart. The search has opened a question about what Narnia owes to places reached by earlier expansion. A kingdom may claim political connection across a wide sea, yet that claim becomes empty when governors use it to excuse abuse. Caspian has acted because the people of the islands were within the reach of Narnian responsibility. He has removed a corrupt governor, restored Lord Byrne to public life, and appointed him Duke of the Lone Islands. Byrne has accepted the burden of lawful restoration, while the ship has taken on provisions and turned towards the unknown. In this way, the first stage of the promise joins discovery with government. The king's adventure must continue, but it cannot continue without justice. You are again upon the deck as darkness gathers fully, and the dawn treader leaves the last clear signs of civilization behind. The sea lies open beneath the stars, black where the sky is clouded, and silver where the moon finds a path through the air. The ship moves east with the same steady breathing that carried her from Narnia. Boards answer beneath your feet, ropes shift overhead. The sails take the wind, release it, and take it again. Salt rests lightly upon your lips. The air is warmer than it was near home, and no chill follows the wind across your face. Around you, the crew works with quiet confidence, guided by lamps that cast small pools of amber upon the deck. Behind the vessel, the lone islands have disappeared into the night. Ahead, the eastern sea contains no familiar harbor, known government, or promise that the next shore will resemble the last. Caspian's figure remains near the stern until darkness hides the line of the islands completely. He began the voyage as a king, pursuing the memory of 7 missing lords. Upon the lone islands, he has become a ruler whose authority must reach beyond the boundaries of immediate comfort. The dawn treader carries him onward because promises do not end when one part of them has been fulfilled. Lord Byrne has been found, yet the other names remain unresolved. The Eastern Sea has offered provisions, danger, political disorder, and a restored government. It has shown that settlements connected with Narnia may possess their own customs and loyalties while remaining part of a larger history. You listen to the low movement of water against the hull and feel the ship continuing through the darkness. The night is wide around you. The course lies east. The dawn treader sails towards less familiar waters. The dawn treader moves eastward after leaving the lone islands, carrying you beyond the last settled harbors and into waters that seem to possess no human memory. The sea lies open on every side, and the ship's sails draw steadily through a pale morning. Behind you, the islands have become a low line beneath the horizon, while ahead there is only blue distance, scattered cloud, and the patient movement of waves. Caspian stands near the prow, studying the empty spaces upon his chart, for the names of the 7 lords remain before him. Lord Octesian has not been found, and the eastern voyage continues through uncertainty. Near midday, an island appears, low and green beneath the clear sky. It has no harbor, watchtower, or smoke rising from any settlement. Long beaches curve beneath wooded slopes, while grey rocks break through the grass like old bones. The dawn treader comes close to the shore, and the anchor drops into water so transparent that you can see the pale sand below. Ropes are carried down, boats are lowered, and the sailors begin moving across the island in small groups. Their voices pass lightly over the water, then fade among the trees. You step ashore with the company upon a strip of warm sand, where small shells lie among flattened blades of grass. The air carries salt from the sea and the green, faintly bitter scent of crushed leaves. Behind you, the dawn treader rises above the shallows, its dark hull reflected in broken pieces between the ripples. A breeze moves through the branches inland, stirring silver undersides and loose strands of vine. The island seems uninhabited, yet it does not feel empty. Birds call from somewhere beyond the trees, and the sound answers itself from a distant ridge. The crew explores the shore and gathers fresh water, fruit, and fallen branches for the galley. Caspian sends men along the coastline, while Edmund and Lucy walk among the trees with reaped sheep. Eustace keeps apart from them, wearing the expression that has become familiar during the voyage. He dislikes the company, distrusts their customs, and carries his discomfort like a private possession. When the others turn inland, he chooses a separate path through the undergrowth. You watch him leave the main company, pushing past fern and thorn without explanation. The path beneath your feet grows narrower as the trees thicken. Roots rise through the soil, polished by rain and age, and the ground slopes gradually towards a line of pale cliffs. Insects murmur in the leaves, while a loose branch taps against another in the breeze. Sunlight reaches the forest floor in thin, shifting columns. Here and there, bright berries hang beneath dark foliage, though the warmth of the day does not remove the island's quiet reserve. From the shore, the sailors' voices become no more than a faint, intermittent thread. Eustace reaches the cliffs alone. A narrow opening breaks the rock beside a fallen tree, and darkness extends beyond it. He looks back towards the trees, sees no one following, and enters the cave. You follow him into air that is dry and still, where the mineral smell of stone replaces the sense of leaf and sea. The passage descends beneath the island, widening as it goes. His footsteps disturb a little dust, and grains of grit slide from the walls. Far behind, the entrance remains a pale shape, already distant. The cave contains no living creature. Its roof bends low in places, forcing Eustace to stoop, and its walls glitter with veins of dark mineral. Cold gathers around the deeper chambers despite the dry air. The floor becomes uneven, covered with pebbles and fragments of rock. Then a faint gleam appears ahead, too yellow to belong to the stone. Eustace moves towards it, and the light grows stronger with each careful step. Beneath the silence, you can hear the soft scrape of his shoes against the ground. The chamber opens suddenly before you, broad enough to contain a house. A dead dragon lies on the far side, its wings folded beside its body, and its long neck curved against the stone. The creature's scales have lost their brightness, carrying the dull colors of dust and old bronze. Its jaws rest upon the floor, and its claws remain extended as though the final moment came without warning. Nothing moves in the chamber except a thin drift of dust descending from the ceiling. The dead dragon lies silent beneath the weight of time. Around the dragon lies a large hoard of treasure. Gold coins rise in shallow banks beneath the sleeping figure, and silver vessels lean against heaps of jewels. Swords, cups, chains, rings, and ornaments from forgotten courts have been gathered in the darkness. Gold flashes in torchlight when Eustace raises his lamp, scattering small reflections across the walls. The hoard has no order that you can understand, though every piece seems to possess a history. Some coins bear unfamiliar kings, while others show devices from lands far beyond the lone islands. The dry cave air rests heavily upon your face, carrying the mineral smell of stone and the faint odor of dust. Beneath Eustace's shoes, cold metal coins shift with a brittle whisper. Rubies lie like dark drops among pale pearls, and a broken crown catches the lamplight beside the dragon's foreleg. The chamber's silence enlarges every movement. A breath becomes a soft disturbance, a footstep a hollow report, and the small flame in the torch leans whenever air moves through the passage. Eustace sees the treasure before he understands the danger. He approaches the hoard with growing attention, bending over coins and examining pieces of jewelry in the torchlight. His imagination begins arranging the objects according to value, rarity, and usefulness. The dead dragon seems no longer frightening because it cannot rise or speak. Eustace believes that the island has offered him something belonging to no one. You watch his face change as greed gathers quietly within him, giving the treasure a greater reality than the absent ship and distant companions. Among the gold, Eustace finds a golden bracelet beside the dragon's foreleg. It is broad, finely worked, and marked with interwoven leaves. The bracelet is too large for an ordinary man, yet it may once have belonged to a noble lord. Later, it will be associated with Lord Octesian, one of the 7 lords Caspian is seeking. Its presence will suggest that Octesian reached the island, though the cave will offer no account of what happened afterwards. For now, Eustace sees only the gold. The bracelet catches the torchlight with a warm, steady gleam. Its surface is scratched in several places, and one edge carries a dark stain that cannot be polished away. The metal feels cold when Eustace lifts it, colder than the coins beneath his fingers. Around you, the treasure gives off no smell of wealth or celebration, only the dry odor of stone and the faint metallic scent left by age. The dead dragon remains beside the hoard, its folded wing casting a long shadow over the bracelet. Eustace removes the bracelet and places it upon his arm. It hangs loosely at first, but the gold feels pleasant against his skin. He studies himself in the curved surface of a silver shield, seeing a thin figure surrounded by riches. The thought of returning to the others with such a discovery does not please him. He imagines their questions, their claims, and the possibility that the treasure may be divided. The cave appears to offer privacy, and privacy seems to promise ownership. The chamber grows darker as the afternoon passes. Eustace piles coins into a hollow near the dragon's body, then spreads a layer of golden pieces beneath himself. The coins press sharply through his clothing, but he shifts them until they form a hollow bed. He places the bracelet near his shoulder, where the torchlight fades into shadow. Beyond the chamber, the passage holds its silence. No sailor calls his name, and no branch moves against the cave entrance. The cold coins beneath your feet form a shifting floor that gives slightly with every step. Small pieces of gold slide down the hoard and settle against one another with delicate clicks. The torch burns unevenly, filling the chamber with a low smell of smoke and oil. Dust clings to the dragon's scales, and a faint line of light remains visible far behind you through the passage. The air is so dry that your lips feel tight, while darkness seems almost solid between the pools of flame. Eustace lies down upon the dragon's hoard. He rests among the coins with the golden bracelet beside him, his head close to the dead creature's foreclaw. At first he remains awake, listening for movement from the island. Then the warmth of the day, the stillness of the chamber, and the weight of his selfish thoughts draw him into sleep. The torch gutters beside the wall. The treasure shines once, then falls into darkness. You remain in the cave as the island passes beneath the stars. During the night, the dead dragon seems to occupy the whole chamber. Its wings rise like collapsed roofs, and its tail disappears beneath the gold. Eustace sleeps without hearing the sea or the distant cries of birds. His dreams have no clear images, though the hoard surrounds them with a dull golden glow. The cave air remains dry and unmoving. Somewhere above, rain may be falling through the forest, but no water reaches the chamber. The dragon does not breathe, and the coins do not warm beneath the sleeping figure. At dawn, Eustace wakes with a body that no longer obeys his memory. His eyes open upon the cave floor from a much lower angle, and the bracelet lies near a limb covered in scales. When he tries to rise, a heavy wing strikes the treasure behind him. Gold spills down the hoard, and the sound travels around the chamber like distant rain. He turns, sees a long snout reflected in the silver shield, and understands that the silent dragon is no longer the only dragon in the cave. Shock passes through him as a confusion of movement. Clawed feet scrape against the metal coins, a tail knocks over a heap of vessels, and broad wings open against the walls. The heavy beat of unfamiliar wings fills the chamber, stirring dust into the torchlight. Eustace tries to speak, but a harsh growl emerges from his throat. He lowers his head and sees scales running along his forelegs, dark and ridged beneath the gold. The golden bracelet remains close to one claw, shining with the same calm brightness as before. Eustace crawls from the hoard and reaches the mouth of the cave. His new body scrapes the stone on either side, while his wings fold awkwardly against his back. Sunlight touches his scales, and the brightness makes him close his eyes. Outside, the island appears altered by distance and height. The trees seem smaller, and the sea extends in a vast ring around the cliffs. He opens his mouth to call for help, but the sound crossing the grass is a deep, broken roar. The morning air is cooler beyond the cave, carrying wet leaves, warm earth, and a trace of salt from the coast. Dew clings to the grass beneath the dragon's claws, darkening the soil where he stands. A few birds leave the trees in sudden silence, and their wings vanish over the ridge. The sun rests low enough to throw long shadows behind the rocks. Every blade of grass bends beneath the passing breeze, while the cave entrance remains black against the pale cliff. The crew discovers the dragon before Eustace can reach the shore. Sailors run from the trees, calling to one another and pointing towards the cliffs. Caspian orders them back, while Edmund draws his sword and Lucy reaches for her dagger. Reapit Sheep stands before the others with his small blade raised, though the dragon's head towers above him. The crew fears and distrusts the creature, for no one can imagine why a dragon has appeared beside the abandoned cave. Eustace attempts to explain himself in ordinary speech. He forms the sounds of his own name, calls for Edmund, and repeats phrases that the crew might recognize. His throat produces only broken roars, hissing breaths, and deep vibrations that shake the nearby leaves. The sailors hear a threat where he intends a plea. One man drops his spear, another steps behind a tree, and several begin moving towards the boats. Eustace lowers his head, but even this gesture seems dangerous beneath the sweep of his horns. Edmund watches the dragon more closely than the others. He notices its uncertain movements, the way it keeps turning towards the ship, and the nervous folding of its wings. The dragon does not attack, though its claws dig trenches into the soil. Its eyes carry something familiar, a stubbornness Edmund has seen during many arguments aboard the Dawn Treader. When the creature speaks again, the harsh sound breaks into a pattern resembling Eustace's voice. Edmund says the name aloud, and the dragon becomes still. The island wind moves across the open ground, lifting dust from the cave mouth and carrying smoke from the ship's galley. Warm lamplight glows through the Dawn Treader's lower windows, although morning has already brightened the shore. Ropes creak against the boats, and the sea knocks gently beneath their wooden sides. The dragon's wings make slow movements behind him, raising eddies through the grass. Around you, fear remains present, but it begins to loosen as Edmund refuses to retreat. Caspian does not immediately accept Edmund's judgment. He studies the dragon's claws, teeth, and immense body, then orders the sailors to keep their weapons ready. The creature bows its head and scratches a message upon the earth with one claw. The marks are uneven, yet Edmund reads the letters as Eustace's name. Lucy approaches next, carrying a strip of cloth from her traveling pack. She does not touch the dragon, but she speaks softly, and the great head lowers until its breath moves the grass. Eustace cannot explain the transformation in ordinary speech, and the crew cannot ask questions he can answer. His loneliness grows more painful than the fear surrounding him. He has been separated from the company by his own choice, and now he is separated from human beings by the shape of his body. The treasure remains behind him in the cave, but its possession brings no comfort. The gold has become a silent witness to greed, selfishness, and consequence. The bracelet gives the sailors another reason to examine the cave. Caspian enters with Edmund and several armed men, while Lucy waits outside. They find the dead dragon, the scattered hoard, and the place where Eustace slept. The golden bracelet is missing from the foreleg, but its pattern matches the description of Lord Octesian's ornament. Caspian understands that Octesian reached the island, and the treasure provides evidence of his journey. The cave, however, does not reveal whether he died there or left by another route. Inside the chamber, the air remains dry and faintly bitter, with the mineral smell of stone pressed into every surface. Gold lies in low mounds beneath the dim torchlight. Silver plates reflect the flames in broken flashes, and jewels show red, green, and blue among the dust. The dead dragon's scales are cold and coarse, while the coins give a hard chill through the soles of your boots. No human mark appears upon the walls, except the shallow scratches made by Eustace during the night. Eustace begins helping the sailors because there is little else he can do. The Dawn Treader needs fresh water, timber from the forest, and heavy stones removed from the shallows. Tasks that would otherwise require many men become possible when the dragon takes hold of a rope or pushes against a loaded cart. His claws remain dangerous, but he learns to use them carefully. He drags tree trunks towards the beach, lifts broken spars, and carries great bundles of wood beneath one folded wing. The ship's galley sends smoke across the shore as the crew prepares the midday meal. The smell of boiled grain, onions, and salted meat travels through the warm air. Ropes lie rough beneath your hands, stiff with salt and worn smooth where sailors have gripped them. The dragon scales make a faint rasping sound whenever he bends, and each movement shifts the ground beneath his weight. From the deck, voices call instructions while the sea folds against the hull in a slow green rhythm. Eustace learns the shape of usefulness. He carries water jars without breaking them, though his claws must remain curved around the handles. He lifts a fallen branch away from a sailor's trapped leg and allows the man to crawl free. He pulls a boat from the mud when the tide begins to turn. Each act reduces the distance between him and the crew, though no one forgets that he remains a dragon. His treatment of the sailors changes because their needs now seem clearer than his own discomfort. The sailors begin speaking to Eustace as though he can understand them. They point towards timber, barrels, ropes, and sections of the ship requiring attention. He answers with nods, low sounds, or scratches upon the sand. Reapit Sheep eventually rides between his shoulders, gripping a ridge of scales while the dragon carries him along the beach. The mouse's courage does not remove the danger, but it gives the crew a pattern they can trust. Eustace moves carefully beneath the small weight. The afternoon grows bright and warm, and the rocks along the shore hold the sun like stored fire. Salt dries in pale lines upon the sailor's clothing, while the dragon's dark scales absorb the heat. The smell of tar rises from the boat, mixed with smoke from the galley and the sharp scent of cut wood. Water drips from the jars Eustace carries, leaving dark spots upon the sand. Beyond the beach, the cave mouth waits among the cliffs, keeping its treasure in shadow. Caspian sends men to search the island for signs of Lord Octesian. They find no dwelling, burial place, or path leading from the cave towards another shore. The evidence remains limited to the bracelet, the dead dragon, and the Hoard. Caspian records the discovery among the names of the missing lords, adding that Octesian reached the island but did not return with the company. The voyage's purpose has become more solemn because each island seems to preserve another fragment of the Seven Lords' fate. By evening, the Dawn Treader is ready to leave. Water has been stored, damaged ropes replaced, and enough were taken aboard for the next stretch of sea. Eustace stands near the waterline while the sailors prepare the boats. The crew no longer raises weapons when he moves, though several men still watch him with unease. Edmund comes close and speaks his name once more. The dragon answers with a quiet rumble that holds neither anger nor threat. The shore cools beneath the descending sun. The rocks lose their warmth, and the grass becomes silver at the edges where dusk gathers. Smoke from the ship's galley hangs low above the sand, carrying the scents of broth, ash, and damp rope. A lantern swings from the stern, casting warm light over the water. The dragon's wings cast long, unfamiliar shapes across the beach. Near his foreleg, the golden bracelet catches the final light before darkness settles. The Dawn Treader leaves the island beneath a sky deepening from blue to violet. Eustace swims beside the ship at first, his wings held close and his head rising and falling with the waves. When the water grows deeper, he flies. The heavy beat of unfamiliar wings strikes the air, then becomes steadier as he learns his strength. From the deck, the sailors watch his broad shape pass above the mass. Edmund remains near the rail, looking up into the darkening sky. For several days, the dragon travels with the ship. He scouts beyond the horizon, searches for reefs, and returns with fish held carefully between his claws. When the Dawn Treader encounters contrary winds, Eustace takes a rope in his teeth and pulls alongside the vessel. His strength assists the sailors with labor that would otherwise require many men. He helps raise a damaged sail, drags the anchor from a rocky shelf, and steadies the ship while repairs are made. His presence becomes part of the crew's daily work. The sea changes color beneath the passing clouds, moving from green near the island to a deep, solemn blue. Spray strikes your face when the wind freshens, and the taste of salt remains upon your lips. The dragon's wings pass overhead with a broad shadow, interrupting the sunlight for several moments. Below, the ship's deck smells of tar, wet canvas, smoke, and old timber. At night, lanterns tremble in their brackets while the waves speak against the planks. Eustace's old selfishness does not disappear at once. He still guards the bracelet, remembers the Hoard, and feels resentment when the crew gives him an order. Yet each task demands attention to another person's safety. A rope may tighten against a sailor's hand, a crate may fall beneath a wing, or a boat may drift into the tide. Eustace learns to notice these dangers before they become accidents. His shape remains monstrous, but his actions begin to resemble those of a companion. Edmund understands the change more clearly than most. He remembers how Eustace separated himself from the company, entered the cave seeking something that belonged only to him, and let the treasure reflect his greed. The dragon's body has made his inward condition visible, though no ordinary speech can describe it. Eustace has become a creature feared by strangers and dependent upon friends. Edmund does not excuse his selfishness, but he recognizes the beginning of repentance. The nights at sea are quiet enough for the ship's smallest sounds to become distinct. A block knocks against the mast, a rope slides through a pulley, and the galley fire settles beneath its ash. The dragon rests upon a rocky ledge near the water, folding his wings around himself. Moonlight follows the ridges of his scales and leaves the golden bracelet dimly illuminated. Far below, the Dawn Treader's lanterns drift across the dark surface like small stars carried by the tide. Eustace eventually approaches Edmund and Lucy on a later shore. He scratches upon the ground, describing the cave, the treasure, and the moment when he woke transformed. He draws the shape of the dead dragon, then marks the place where he slept. He touches the bracelet and points towards the sea, showing that it belonged to the lord whose name Caspian seeks. The crew gathers around the marks, listening to the dragon's rough sounds and Edmund's interpretation. Sand beneath the dragon's claws is cool and fine, slipping into the shallow grooves he makes. Lucy's lantern throws warm light across the drawings, while the wind carries the distant smell of smoke from the ship's galley. Edmund's shadow falls over the shape of the cave and moves whenever the flame bends. The bracelet rests against a dark scale, bright as a small pool of sunlight. For a little while, the island and the sea seem to hold their breath. Eustace wants to return to human form. He has seen enough of his reflection in the water to understand that strength alone cannot restore him. He has tried scratching at the scales, rolling upon stones, and forcing his wings against the ground. Each attempt has brought pain without change. The dragon's body is not a garment he can remove by wishing, nor a prison he can open with claws. His transformation cannot be reversed by his own efforts. At night, Eustace sleeps apart from the sailors, though he no longer sleeps upon treasure. He coils beneath a stand of trees and keeps the bracelet tucked beneath one wing. Dreams return from the cave, filled with coins, silence, and the dead dragon's unmoving eye. He wakes before dawn and watches the crew preparing breakfast. The sailors speak quietly near the fire, and their voices no longer carry the sharp edge of suspicion. Still, he remains outside their circle. The air before sunrise has a cool, damp texture, and the ground gives softly beneath your feet. Ash glows beneath the galley fire, sending thin smoke through the branches. Metal pots warm above the coals, while bread and dried fruit are arranged upon a rough board. The dragon's breath forms a faint mist in the darkness, though the day has not yet begun. Somewhere near the shore, a small wave breaks against stone and withdraws with a silvery whisper. When the company comes again to a place where Aslan's presence can be felt, Edmund tells Eustace that returning will require more than effort. Eustace listens, lowering his enormous head until one eye rests near the ground. The name Aslan reaches him through the wind and the creaking ship. He has heard of the lion, though he has resisted every truth that might demand humility. Now his strength has become useless against the scales. Beyond the beach, the sea opens towards the east, carrying the dawn treader into weather that changes by the hour. The sky holds long bands of grey, and the tide leaves a dark border among the stones. Wet sand reflects the forms of sailors moving towards the boats. The dragon stands apart from them, his wings folded beneath the low clouds. A smell of rain approaches from the horizon, mingling with smoke, salt, and the warm scent of the ship's timber. Aslan comes to Eustace beside the fire. The lion's arrival is quiet, yet every creature upon the shore becomes aware of it. Eustace sees him in the darkness and understands that this encounter cannot be managed by argument or force. Aslan leads him away from the others to a place where the ground is bare and the firelight reaches only in fragments. The dragon follows because he cannot do anything else. The golden bracelet remains fastened around his foreleg. The change begins when Aslan's claws touch the dragon's scales. Eustace feels pain spreading through his whole body, sharper than any wound caused by stone or rope. The lion tears away the outer covering, and beneath it lies another skin, pale and tender. Eustace removes this layer himself, but another appears below it. Each time he reaches the surface, the same pain returns. He cannot achieve the change alone, because every attempt leaves him trapped within another form. The fire burns steadily beside the ordeal, sending warmth across the sand. Rough bandages lie ready near the sailors, and the air smells of smoke, wool, and damp earth. The dragon's scales fall in heavy pieces, striking the ground with dull sounds. Aslan's movements remain firm and deliberate, while Eustace's breathing becomes uneven. Lamplight from the ship touches the edges of the scene, showing Edmund and Lucy waiting nearby without speaking. At last, Aslan plunges Eustace into water. The pain becomes complete, then passes into a strange and sudden lightness. The dragon's shape breaks away, and Eustace rises as a human boy, exhausted and shivering beside the fire. His skin is tender, his clothing gone, and his arms tremble when he tries to lift them. Lucy wraps him in rough bandages and a blanket. Edmund kneels near him, while the sailors keep their eyes lowered from the quietness of the moment. Warm lamplight rests upon Eustace's face, and smoke from the ship's galley moves slowly through the night air. The bandages feel coarse against his skin, while the blanket holds the fire's heat. Behind him, the sea continues its patient movement against the shore. The golden bracelet has been removed and placed beside Caspian's chart. Its surface glows faintly near the flames, carrying evidence of Lord Octesian and the silent island where his trail ended. Eustace tells the company what happened, though his voice is weak and altered by pain. He speaks of wandering away, entering the cave, discovering the dead dragon, and sleeping upon the treasure. He admits that greed and selfishness had shaped his thoughts before the transformation. The Hoard had seemed to promise freedom from other people, but it had left him alone inside a body that could not speak. He does not describe himself as innocent, and no one asks him to do so. The crew listens while the fire settles into glowing coals. Water drips from the edge of a bandage and darkens the sand beside Eustace's hand. The night wind moves across the beach with a cool mineral scent from the cliffs. Somewhere aboard the dawn treader, a loose fitting knocks gently against the mast. The sound is regular and subdued, giving the silence between Eustace's words a steady measure. No one returns to the cave before morning. The island's treasure remains part of the Voyage's pattern of temptation and consequence. It has drawn Eustace into isolation, preserved evidence of Lord Octesian, and revealed the danger hidden beneath apparent fortune. Gold lies quietly in darkness, neither good nor evil by itself, yet capable of enlarging whatever desire approaches it. Eustace leaves the Hoard behind, but the memory remains within him. The lesson is not spoken as a rule because the experience has already made it plain. At dawn, Eustace stands again upon the deck of the Dawn Treader. His body is human, though bandages cover his arms and shoulders, and he moves carefully near the mast. The island recedes behind the ship, carrying the cave, the dead dragon, and the treasure into distance. Caspian keeps Lord Octesian's bracelet among the records of the voyage. Edmund watches Eustace take his place beside the sailors, no longer separated from the company by contempt. The morning sea is calm, colored with long strips of silver beneath the pale sun. Wet canvas gives off the scent of salt and rope, while smoke from the galley rises through the rigging. Eustace's hands rest upon the rough rail, and his fingers close around the wood as though confirming its familiar shape. Beneath the deck, boots move across planks, pots shift in the kitchen, and voices carry softly between the masts. The Dawn Treader continues east. Eustace's time as a dragon becomes a turning point in his character. He remains capable of irritation, pride, and unkind thoughts, but he no longer treats them as possessions to protect. He has learned that the company's work depends upon many hands, and that strength gains meaning only when placed at another person's service. The sailors remember the dragon who helped raise the sails, while Eustace remembers how impossible it was to ask for help in ordinary speech. The ship passes into another long afternoon, and the island disappears entirely behind the curve of the sea. Caspian studies the chart, marking Octesian's bracelet beside the name of the uninhabited shore. The seven lords remain the purpose of the journey, and each discovery draws the company farther east. Eustace sits near Edmund, listening to the quiet exchange of orders. He does not speak often, yet his silence now feels different from the silence inside the cave. The deck warms beneath the sunlight, and the ship's timbers give off a faint smell of tar and dry wood. Canvas swells overhead with a soft, continuous pressure. The sea brushes the hull in overlapping strokes, while the wind brings a clean taste of salt. A coil of rope rests near Eustace's feet, rough and pale against the planks. Beyond the bow, the horizon remains open, and the course leads towards waters still unknown to the company. The memory of the dead dragon follows Eustace without haunting every hour. He remembers its folded wings, the dust upon its scales, and the stillness of its jaws. He remembers the gold beneath his sleeping body and the bracelet lying beside the foreleg. He remembers waking with wings and scales, unable to make the crew understand. Above all, he remembers the painful change beside the fire, when Aslan's intervention carried him beyond what his own strength could accomplish. Night returns over the eastern sea. Lanterns shine along the deck, and the mast becomes a dark line against the stars. The sailors settle into their watches, speaking in low voices as the Dawn Treader rises and falls. Eustace remains near the stern, where the water streams away in pale foam. Edmund stands nearby, and neither boy needs to fill the darkness with words. The voyage continues beyond the uninhabited island, carrying its evidence, its consequence, and its changed companion eastward. Night returns over the eastern sea, and you remain beside the stern while the Dawn Treader carries its lanterns through the darkness. The mast rises as a narrow black line among unfamiliar stars, and pale foam slips away beneath the ship. Eustace stands quietly near the rail, with Edmund a little distance from him, while the sailors settle into their watches. No one speaks for long, because the eastern water seems to gather silence around the vessel. The voyage continues beyond the uninhabited island, carrying its evidence, its consequence, and its changed companion towards another horizon. By morning, the sea has altered, becoming silver-green beneath a widening light. You stand on the forward deck as the Dawn Treader enters a chain of strange islands, each low and green, each separated by channels so still that their reflections appear almost solid. Sunlight scatters across the motionless water in small metallic fragments, and the ship seems to move through a sheet of beaten silver. Caspian studies the charts. Though the coastlines drawn, they grow less reliable with every mile eastward. Drinian watches the currents and narrow passages, while the crew prepares fresh water, dried meat, and sailcloth for whatever shore may offer shelter. The farther east the ship travels, the less familiar its geography becomes. A warm wind reaches you from the islands, carrying the scent of flowers that grow nowhere in the lands you know. It passes over the deck with a soft touch, stirring loose ropes and lifting the edges of the maps. Below, the sea holds its color with scarcely any movement, and small fish flicker beneath the surface like threads of polished glass. The distant beaches are pale and smooth, bordered by palms whose leaves scarcely tremble. A faint ringing comes from somewhere among the rocks, although no bell can be seen. The air is bright enough to make every shadow distinct, while the water remains strangely quiet beneath the hull. The first island rises ahead like a green hill surrounded by a belt of shining shallows. Caspian orders the sails shortened, and the Dawn Treader glides towards a narrow inlet. You watch the anchors being prepared while Drinian measures the depth with a weighted line. The soundings are generous near the shore, yet the water beneath the ship is so clear that the bottom appears close enough to touch. When a sailor lowers a brass cup over the side, its surface changes color before your eyes. The metal becomes yellow, then brilliant, then almost too bright to look upon. A murmur passes along the deck, and Caspian turns towards the island with sudden caution. The sunlight lies upon the bay in long, unmoving bands, and the shallows glow as though a second dawn has been poured beneath the surface. You hear water slipping against the planks, though no ordinary wave disturbs the inlet. Seagrass bends far below, its green blades edged with gold. A few white birds walk along the beach, leaving prints in the sand that shine briefly before fading. The rocks are warm beneath your hand, and their roughness contrasts with the smooth brightness covering the little brass cup. From the forest comes the dry click of insects, followed by a hush that seems to spread from tree to tree. Caspian brings the cup to the center of the deck, where everyone can see it. No one can doubt what has happened, because the brass has become pure gold, heavy and bright in the captain's hand. A second sailor reaches towards the rail, then withdraws his fingers. The golden water has created a temptation before the crew has even stepped ashore. In low voices, the travelers discuss how much treasure can safely be taken, if any treasure can be safely taken at all. Caspian listens without haste, understanding that a single cup might become a cargo, and a cargo might become a reason to remain. The bay holds a peculiar stillness, as if the island has placed a hand upon the sea. Gold light trembles across the deck, though the surface beneath remains nearly flat. You smell salt, warm wood, and a faint mineral scent rising from the water. The sailors' boots make muted sounds on the planks, and every movement seems unusually deliberate. Around the inlet, reeds stand in dense clusters, their stems yellow at the tips. A small crab crosses a stone and leaves behind a glimmering trail where its wet shell has touched the shore. Far inland, flowers open beneath the sun, releasing a fragrance both sweet and slightly bitter. The travelers remember the ancient story of King Midas, whose desire made gold out of whatever his hands could reach. This island does not turn the voyage into a historical event, and no king from the old tales stands among the trees. Yet the old myth gives shape to the uneasiness gathered around the Golden Bay. Lucy looks at the cup, then at Caspian, and sees that treasure may be dangerous even when it arrives without violence. The prince orders that nothing be taken from the water except the cup already recovered. Navigation, provisioning, and careful judgment remain more valuable than a hold filled with glittering metal. When the ship leaves the inlet, the golden cup is wrapped in cloth and secured inside a chest. You feel the vessel move back into deeper water, where the color returns to ordinary blue and green. The strange bay falls behind, shining beneath the morning. Caspian does not discard the cup, because it may later serve as evidence or payment, but neither does he permit another sailor to test the water. The Dawn Treader continues east through the island chain, passing cliffs striped with red stone and beaches covered in black shells. With each channel, the charts become more uncertain, and the crew relies increasingly upon the eye, the lead line, and the changing wind. The afternoon settles warmly over the deck, and the ship moves beneath a pale, cloudless sky. Sails curve gently overhead, their fabric making a soft, steady creaking sound. The smell of tar mingles with the scent of fruit from the provisions room, where servants count jars and sacks for the next landing. Along the horizon, islands appear and disappear behind heat haze, sometimes looking close enough to reach and sometimes impossibly distant. A leather chart lies open beside the mast, its inked coastline interrupted by blank spaces. You watch Caspian place a stone upon the map, marking a position that no earlier sailor had recorded. Near sunset, a larger island appears, covered by dense forest and divided by sandy paths leading inland. The shore is quiet, yet figures can be seen moving between the trees. They are shorter than men, broad in the body, and oddly arranged in their clothing. Some carry sticks, some wear hats tilted at curious angles, and several walk with a rolling motion that makes their progress resemble a gentle dance. The crew lowers a boat, and Lucy travels with Caspian, Edmund, Eustace, and a small party of sailors. Their soft footfalls sound upon the sand as the island's inhabitants gather among the palms. The warm air carries the scent of island flowers before darkness has fully arrived. The sandy paths retain the day's heat beneath your feet, while the leaves above collect the last red light. Somewhere beyond the visible trees, murmuring voices rise and fall inside a hidden house. The voices are not threatening, but their rhythm is difficult to follow, as though several conversations are taking place at once. A wooden mask hangs from a branch, painted with 2 eyes on one side and 3 on the other. Near a wall of woven reeds, baskets have been arranged in a perfect circle, although nobody appears to know why. The islanders call themselves dufflepuds, though they are also called duffers in some editions and by certain visitors. Their bodies and customs are comic, but the comedy has been shaped by enchantment rather than by nature alone. One has a single large foot, another has an arm that seems too long, and a third wears a coat backwards because he believes the buttons are meant to face the trees. They argue over ordinary matters with tremendous seriousness, particularly the correct way to sit, sleep, carry water, and greet the moon. Caspian learns that a magician's spell has transformed them and that the invisible magician governs the island from a distance. The dufflepuds initially resist any change to their appearance or condition because long enchantment has become familiar to them. A crooked body may feel safer than an uncertain remedy, and a strange custom may seem more proper than an old one remembered imperfectly. You hear them debating whether a second arm would make a person less respectable, while another insists that 2 eyes on one side of the face encourage better manners. Their society has made room for the spell in every household. Children are taught to turn in circles before entering a room, and meals are served according to the direction of the wind. Enchantment has become part of ordinary social life. The moon rises over the forest, lighting the paths with a thin white glow. Leaves brush against one another high above you, and the flowers release stronger perfumes as the air cools. From the hidden house comes the scrape of furniture, followed by low voices and a sudden burst of coughing. The Dufflepud's shadows stretch across the sand in forms that look almost ordinary, while their bodies remain wonderfully irregular. A lamp burns behind a curtain made from woven grass. Its flame moves whenever someone passes, sending amber lines across the wall. The island seems peaceful, although the invisible magician's presence lingers like a thought nobody wishes to speak aloud. Lucy discovers the magician's book inside the hidden house, where it lies beneath a cloth marked with silver symbols. The book is large, old, and heavy enough to leave an impression in the dust. Its pages contain spells, diagrams, recipes, warnings, and fragments of magical knowledge gathered across many years. The papery smell of the old spellbook fills the room when Lucy opens it, mingling with wax, dried leaves, and the faint odor of rain held in the timber walls. She turns each page carefully, while the Dufflepuds gather close enough to touch the margins but remain afraid of what the writing may reveal. The pages are pale and crowded with narrow handwriting, some lines written in ink and others in colors that seem to move. You see pictures of doors opening into darkness, cups that remember every drink, and mirrors that show a person as they might appear after 100 years. Several spells promise beauty, influence, or knowledge without effort, and Lucy pauses longer beside those passages. The book presents moral and personal temptations as clearly as it presents instructions. Its magic can change outward form, but the choice of what to desire remains within the person holding the page. The room grows quiet while Lucy studies the spell that governs the island. Its words are difficult, and some have been crossed out by a hand that may belong to the invisible magician. She reads the directions aloud in a low voice, then returns to the beginning when the meaning seems uncertain. The Dufflepuds fidget, whisper, and disagree about whether the remedy should produce straighter legs, more ordinary noses, or simply a return to their former selves. Lucy understands that physical strength will not solve the problem. Her task requires patience, attention, and the willingness to continue when the enchantment offers no quick answer. Outside, the night wind moves through the palms with a sound like distant rain. You stand near the doorway, where the warm air carries the scent of jasmine and a sharper fragrance from crushed herbs. A moth circles the lamp, throwing a soft shadow across the open book. Beneath the table, sand has gathered in little ridges, each one made by the feet of anxious visitors. The murmuring voices in the hidden house become softer as Lucy reads. Somewhere beyond the walls, a bell sounds once, and the Dufflepuds fall silent until its fading note disappears among the trees. Lucy begins with a small alteration, following the book's instructions one line at a time. She asks for a basin, a length of red thread, 3 leaves from a tree growing beside running water, and a stone warmed in the fire. The Dufflepuds object to each item, not because it is difficult to find, but because every object has a custom attached to it. The red thread must be carried by someone walking backwards, the leaves must be counted by a person with 1 foot, and the stone cannot be touched until the moon reaches the highest branch. Lucy listens to every objection and adjusts the ritual without losing its purpose. Dawn arrives slowly over the island, turning the eastern sky from grey to pearl. Dew gathers along the grass, and the sandy paths feel cool where the night's warmth has faded. The old house smells of ashes, herbs, damp wood, and paper. Outside, birds call from the forest in irregular patterns, while the Dufflepuds wait beneath the eaves. Their garments are bright in the new light, patched with green, orange, and blue cloth. A crooked hat slips over one face, and its owner refuses help because he has spent many years learning to see around the brim. The first spell does not restore anyone completely, but it loosens the enchantment. One Dufflepud's long arm shortens slightly, while another gains a second toe that makes walking less painful. The changes are so modest that several islanders insist nothing has happened. Others become frightened and demand that Lucy close the book. Their resistance is not simple foolishness, because the spell has shaped their memories and their understanding of themselves. A familiar absurdity can be more comfortable than an unfamiliar improvement. Lucy therefore proceeds slowly, allowing each person time to decide whether the next change may be accepted. The forest brightens around you as the sun climbs above the palms. Tiny drops of water shine on broad leaves, and the air carries the green smell of stems broken during the night. From the beach comes the distant creak of the boat pulled above the tide line. The ship's sailors wait there with provisions, speaking quietly while they examine the shore. A lizard rests on a warm stone, its skin patterned like old bronze. On the path, several dufflepuds practice standing upright, then abandon the effort and sit down together beneath a flowering tree. The invisible magician watches from somewhere beyond ordinary sight, and the islanders speak of him as though he were both master and weather. He governs from a distance through written commands, altered rooms, and objects that move when nobody touches them. A door opens by itself when Lucy reaches a difficult passage, revealing a staircase that was not present before. At the top, she finds a small chamber filled with empty shelves and a window looking towards the sea. No person stands there, but a voice murmurs from the walls, warning her that the book can grant anything she wishes. Lucy closes the cover without answering. A cooler wind enters the chamber, carrying salt from the eastern shore. The pages lift and settle while the book lies beneath Lucy's hands. Dust moves along the floor in thin lines, and the empty shelves cast long shadows across the plaster. You can hear the dufflepuds waiting below, their voices muffled by the ceiling. Beyond the window, clouds gather over the distant islands, though the sky above the house remains clear. The magician's voice has faded, yet its promise remains in the room, gentle and persuasive, like a tune remembered from childhood. Lucy chooses the spell that will help the dufflepuds rather than those that would alter her own appearance or grant her private knowledge. She reads until the words become familiar, then copies the necessary signs onto the floor with powdered shell. The work requires repeated checking, because one misplaced mark could change the result. Caspian remains nearby, ready to protect the group, though there is little that a sword can do against a spell written in a book. Edmund watches Lucy with quiet respect, and even Eustace remains still while the old magic gathers around the room. The powder makes a faint, dry sound as Lucy draws the final line. A fragrance of crushed leaves and warm stone spreads through the chamber. The book's pages turn without wind, stopping at a picture of figures standing beneath a star. Below, the dufflepuds begin to sing, though they cannot agree on the tune. Their voices mingle with the rustle of palms and the distant wash of the sea. A small blue flame appears in the center of the pattern, wavering without heat. You feel the air grow denser around your hands, while the walls seem to lean inward to listen. The spell lifts in stages, beginning with the customs that have caused the greatest confusion. The dufflepuds stop turning before doorways, and they set their baskets down without arranging them in circles. One removes his backward coat and discovers that it fits more comfortably when worn in the usual direction. Another looks at the moon without bowing, then laughs at the unexpected ease of the gesture. Their bodies change more slowly, because shape is tied to memory and fear. Some accept straighter backs, while others keep their unusual feet, declaring that a familiar difference need not be treated as a defect. Rain begins beyond the forest, tapping lightly upon leaves and roofs. The air becomes cooler, and the scent of flowers deepens beneath the wet branches. Drops strike the sandy paths, making small dark marks that spread into one another. Within the house, the lamp burns steadily while the blue flame fades into the floor. The dufflepuds' voices rise in a mixture of laughter, complaint, and careful discussion. A few still argue that their former forms were better, and the argument sounds almost ordinary. Outside, water runs from the eaves in silver threads. Lucy returns to several passages in the book. because the enchantment cannot be undone by one command. Each alteration must be balanced against the others, and every person responds differently. The magician's spell has entered habits, jokes, household rules, and private memories, so the island cannot simply be restored to an imagined earlier state. Lucy works through the pages with patience rather than force. She changes one custom, waits for its effects, and then chooses the next. By midday, the Dufflepuds can make their own decisions without consulting invisible instructions hidden in the walls. The rain passes towards the western sea, leaving the forest bright and wet. You smell soaked bark, crushed flowers, and clean sand warming beneath returning sunlight. Water hangs from palm fronds in heavy drops, falling whenever a bird lands upon them. The hidden house has opened its shutters, and fresh air moves across the old floorboards. The Dufflepuds carry their baskets along the path without ceremonial turns, although one still pauses halfway and looks embarrassed. From the beach, the Dawn Treader's bell sounds twice, reminding Caspian that the tide and the passage east cannot be ignored. The crew must continue, because food, water, and daylight govern the voyage as surely as enchantment governs the island. Caspian leaves behind a portion of supplies, along with tools and cloth that the Dufflepuds can use while their customs settle into new patterns. He keeps the golden cup locked away, refusing to test whether its value might purchase anything useful. Drinian checks the tide, the wind, and the narrow channel between two reefs. Lucy carries the magician's book until its pages become blank, after which it grows light enough to rest beneath her arm. The invisible magician is no longer heard. The shore glows beneath the afternoon sun, and the wet sand reflects the figures gathered beside the boat. You hear soft footfalls behind you as the Dufflepuds come to offer their farewells. Their bodies remain comic in some respects, but the comedy now belongs more fully to them. One islander has chosen to retain a single large foot because it makes dancing easier. Another keeps his long arm and uses it to reach fruit from high branches. Their customs are changing, though not all at once, and the old spell still survives in small, harmless gestures that may fade with time. Caspian steps into the boat, and Lucy looks once towards the house where the book was found. The windows stand open, showing only shelves, woven mats, and the faint reflection of flowers outside. Edmund takes an oar, while Eustace sits near the bow and watches the water. The Dufflepuds remain on the sand, lifting their hands in several different styles of farewell. Behind them, the forest rises in layers of green, and the paths disappear beneath leaves. You feel the boat move away from the island, its keel making a narrow, dark line across the bright shallows. The sea receives the Dawn Treader once more, carrying the ship between islands whose names are unknown. Sunlight scatters across the water in fragments that resemble coins, though no one on deck mistakes them for treasure. The Golden Danger remains behind, and the ancient shadow of King Midas withdraws with it into the morning haze. Caspian orders the sails raised, then checks the provisions and the remaining fresh water. Drinian marks the island on the chart, while the sailors coil the ropes and secure the boats. Their progress depends upon navigation, provisioning, and careful judgment, not upon the glitter of an enchanted shore. A long evening settles over the eastern sea, and the air grows soft around the ship. The deck boards retain the sun's heat, while the rail feels cool beneath your palm. Above, unfamiliar stars appear one by one, arranged in patterns no sailor aboard can name. The water is darker now, but small waves catch the starlight and return it in broken lines. From below deck comes the muted sound of dishes being stored, followed by the slow creak of the vessel continuing east. The Dawn Treader's journey moves repeatedly between political islands and magical ones, and each kind of shore asks for a different form of care. Some places require treaties, stores, maps, and knowledge of rulers, while others demand patience, restraint, and attention to invisible causes. Caspian has learned that an island may threaten a voyage through temptation as easily as through war. Lucy has learned that a book of spells can test character more quietly than any battlefield. Together, these lessons travel with the crew, although no one speaks of them loudly beneath the unfamiliar stars. Night deepens around the Dawn Treader, and you stand beneath the mast while the eastern wind fills the sails. The rigging hums gently overhead, and the ship rises over long, dark swells. Somewhere ahead lie more islands, more waters, and perhaps shores that have never appeared upon any chart. The geography grows less familiar with every league, yet the vessel continues according to compass, stars, tide, and sound judgment. Behind you, the duffel-puds remain beneath their flowering trees, beginning a life no longer wholly governed by enchantment. Before you, the sea opens beneath strange constellations, and the Dawn Treader sails onward. For several days, the water carries you beneath a sky washed clean by distant rain, while the Dawn Treader moves eastward through a widening silence. The ship's timbers answer softly beneath your feet, and each familiar creak seems gentler after the thunderous waters you have crossed. Around you, the sea holds long folds of blue and silver, changing color whenever clouds pass over the sun. At night, the stars gather above the mast in unfamiliar patterns, and the dark surface receives their trembling reflections without disturbance. The wind smells faintly of salt, wet rope, and the warm resin rising from the deck. No island appears during daylight, though distant birds sometimes cross the horizon and vanish into brightness. You stand beside the rail while the Dawn Treader climbs another swell, feeling cold spray settle upon your hands. Far ahead, Ramandu's island waits beyond the eastern water, quiet beneath a clear and patient sky. At last, the Dawn Treader reaches Ramandu's island, where the harbor lies so still that the ship seems to enter a basin of glass. You look down through clear water over pale sand, and small fish move between stones beneath the hull. The island rises gently beyond the shore, with low green slopes, scattered trees, and grass brightened by morning. No crowded quay meets you, and no row of houses breaks the quiet line of the land. The anchor descends with a muted splash, and the chain slides into the transparent water like distant rain. Caspian comes ashore with the travelers, while the sailors remain near the vessel, watching the unfamiliar coast. The air feels cooler than the season suggests, although the sun has already lifted above the eastern sea. Somewhere inland, water runs over rock, and a single white bird calls from among the trees. You follow the path towards the island's center, where a presence older than any ordinary dwelling seems to wait. The harbor remains behind you as a shallow crescent of brightness, bordered by pale sand and delicate reeds. The ship's reflection rests almost perfectly beneath her, disturbed only when a small current circles the rudder. Along the shore, smooth stones retain the night's coolness, while patches of grass release a faint smell of earth, salt, and crushed leaves. The island's trees hold their branches without movement, and their shadows lie sharply upon the ground. Even the gulls appear subdued, gliding low over the water without quarreling or haste. Your footsteps make little sound upon the narrow path, whose edges are softened by moss and tiny flowering plants. Behind the greenery, the sea remains visible as a narrow band of blue, brightening steadily beneath the morning. Ramandu's island seems set apart from ordinary time, as though the harbor has waited in stillness for 7 quiet years. Beyond the first rise, you find a great table prepared beneath the open sky, standing upon a broad lawn near the heart of the island. Fruit, bread, and polished dishes lie arranged in abundance, although no servant moves among them. Silver cups catch the daylight, and shallow bowls contain figs, grapes, apples, and other fruits whose colors appear unusually vivid. Loaves rest upon white cloths, their crusts unbroken and their warmth mysteriously preserved. Caspian approaches slowly, because the table seems prepared for guests expected long ago. Beneath the nearby branches, you see three figures seated with their heads upon folded arms. Long beards rest across the table, reaching over plates and cups like pale rivers of wool. The sleepers do not stir when the travelers draw close, and their hands lie motionless beside untouched knives. Their faces appear calm, although the surrounding stillness carries something deeper than ordinary rest. The three missing lords are Revilian, Argos, and Mavramorn, asleep at Ramandu's table. A mild breeze crosses the lawn, yet the laden table remains strangely undisturbed beneath the open sky. Fruit keeps its polished sheen, and crumbs lie exactly where they have fallen upon the white cloth. The scent of bread mingles with grass and salt, forming a simple fragrance belonging equally to shore and meadow. Bees pass over the cups without entering them, and a butterfly settles briefly upon the rim of a silver dish. The sleepers' garments show no dust from travel, and their long beards remain soft, bright, and carefully arranged across the table. Around you, the grass bends in narrow paths where unseen feet may once have walked. A shallow stream murmurs nearby, carrying fragments of leaves towards the harbor. Above the table, the branches admit a clear blue light, while shadows gather gently beneath the plates and benches. The whole scene possesses the peaceful appearance of a feast interrupted only moments ago, though 7 years have passed since the lords closed their eyes. You hear the account of the three sleepers from Ramandu's daughter, who comes quietly across the grass to meet Caspian and the travelers. Her manner is composed, and her voice carries easily through the still air without disturbing the men at the table. She explains that Revilian, Argos, and Mavramorn have slept for 7 years, remaining untouched by age or ordinary hunger. Their sleep began after a quarrel among the 7 lords who had sailed from Narnia in search of the eastern boundary. The dispute concerned whether their expedition should continue eastward or turn back towards Narnia. Some argued that prudence required a return, while others believed that the promise of the voyage demanded further obedience. Voices became bitter, and loyalty gave way to anger beneath strange skies. Lord Roop had already been taken by the Dark Island, and fear of further loss sharpened every disagreement. In the consequences of that quarrel, a knife associated with the White Witch became involved, binding the dispute to an older evil. The grass around the table holds the faint smell of salt carried from the harbor, even though the sea lies beyond the low hill. Sunlight rests upon the dishes and makes each polished surface appear warm, while the undersides remain cool and shadowed. A small breeze travels through the long grass, touching your ankles before disappearing among the flowers. The tablecloth shifts by a finger's breadth, then settles, leaving the bowls and fruit exactly as they were. Near Revilian's elbow, a pear has softened slightly at its stem, but no other food shows the marks of passing years. Argos's beard lies across a silver plate, and several pale strands glimmer where the light reaches them. Mavramorn's hand rests beside a cup whose surface reflects the branches overhead. The sleepers breathe so quietly that their movements seem part of the landscape rather than signs of living bodies. You feel no terror beside them, only a solemn patience, as if the island itself has preserved their hope. Ramandu's daughter tells you that the quarrel ended with a terrible choice after the 7 lords had reached the place where the table stood. A knife associated with the White Witch had been brought among the company, and its presence carried the cold memory of Narnia's oldest enchantments. The weapon did not create their anger, but it became part of the consequences that followed. 3 lords chose to remain at the table, while others departed in confusion, and the enchanted sleep closed over Revilian, Argos, and Mavramorn. Their companions could not wake them by calling, shaking, or offering food and drink. Ordinary medicine failed, and even the strongest sailors found no way to lift their heads from their arms. Lord Roop's absence deepened the sorrow of the expedition, for the Dark Island had already claimed him. The remaining lords met different fates, including one transformed into a dragon and another lost to the sea. You hear that the sleepers may yet be restored, but no simple passage of time will release them. A cool current moves across the lawn, bringing the smell of wet stone from the stream and the distant salt of open water. Beneath the table, the ground is firm and springy, covered with short grass that has never been scorched by the sun. The fruit remains bright beneath the morning, though leaf shadows drift slowly over its skins. Polished dishes hold small reflections of clouds, birds, and the quiet figures gathered around them. Somewhere behind you, a rope knocks once against the dawn treader's mast, then becomes silent again. The harbour water shines through a gap in the trees, clear enough to show pale sand beneath its gentle ripples. No insect whines near the sleepers, and no bird lands upon the table. The island seems to guard the lords with a patience that is neither human nor cruel. You remain close enough to see the slight rise and fall of their shoulders, while the years gather invisibly around them. Hope rests beside the table, delicate but not extinguished, like the last light beneath a closed door. When Caspian asks whether the sleeping lords can be awakened, Ramandu's daughter gives an answer carrying both sorrow and quiet assurance. She says that ordinary means cannot reach them because the spell belongs to the deeper order of the island. Their bodies are not dying, and their sleep is not empty, but they remain beyond the power of ordinary hands. The correct work must continue before any restoration becomes possible, and that work lies farther east. She explains that the quest must continue to the world's end, where the waters and sky become unlike all familiar places. The Dawn Treader has not crossed the sea merely to return with a partial account of its journey. Caspian listens without interrupting, and the expression upon his face changes as the meaning settles upon him. He has ruled kingdoms, commanded ships, and carried responsibility for every companion under his protection. Yet Ramandu's daughter speaks of a boundary beyond which even a king cannot simply proceed. The light changes gradually across the lawn, moving from the silver clarity of morning towards a warmer gold. A few clouds gather above the western sea, but the island remains sheltered beneath a wide, open sky. The smell of grass becomes sweeter as sunlight touches the damp blades, while salt lingers faintly along the breeze. On the great table, grapes shine like dark glass, and the bread casts a soft shadow upon the cloth. Revillion's beard has fallen over one plate, while Argos's curls lie near a polished cup. Mavramorn's sleeve rests against the wood, marked by a narrow line of sunlight. Nearby, a lizard crosses a stone and pauses beside a tuft of thyme. The quiet harbour can still be seen below, with the Dawn Treader floating above pale sand. You hear the sea making small sounds against the shore, each wave arriving separately and leaving without haste. Nothing on Ramandu's island urges you forward, although the unseen eastern waters are already waiting. You learn that the swords carried by the travellers must be placed upon a slan's table before the voyage can pass beyond the island's appointed boundary. The weapons have travelled through storms, enchantments, darkness, and regions where the ordinary world seemed to lose its shape. Each sword bears the memory of its owner, yet all must be surrendered together upon the table. The act is not a celebration of victory, and no promise of earthly reward accompanies it. It is a preparation, quiet and exact, for the final eastward passage. After the swords have been laid upon a slan's table, only 3 companions can continue beyond it. The number is spoken without anger, but it falls heavily upon those gathered beneath the trees. Caspian understands that the voyage has reached a limit imposed by something larger than command. Reapert hears the same words and remains still, his small paws resting upon the hilt of his sword. Around you, the island keeps its silence while the companions begin to measure the distance between duty and desire. The great table waits beneath starlight when evening arrives, and its dishes take on a darker, more mysterious brightness. Fruit, bread, and polished dishes remain arranged beneath the open sky, untouched by insects or falling leaves. The moon rises over the eastern water, making the harbour below appear filled with pale metal. Long beards rest across the sleeping lord's arms, almost luminous against their shadowed garments. A bowl of red fruit reflects the moon in several small points, while the silver cups hold narrow strips of sky. The grass cools beneath your feet, and the faint smell of salt becomes clearer after sunset. From the shore, you hear water touching sand with a delicate, repeated whisper. The trees above you are black against the stars, but their leaves continue to move in a breeze too gentle for the tablecloth. Ramandu's island provides a quiet interval before the voyage's most mysterious waters, and the night seems to lengthen around that pause. You meet Ramandu beneath the stars, resting after his celestial work in a dwelling open to the sea and the quiet island air. He is a star who has taken human form, though his face and bearing suggest a brightness that does not belong entirely to Earth. His years are not measured like yours, and his rest follows labor performed far beyond the waters of Narnia. He speaks with patience about the eastern journey, as though he has watched many travelers approach the limits of the known world. Ramandu does not command Caspian, yet his words make clear that the voyage has entered a region where ordinary authority cannot decide everything. You hear his name again beside the open table, connected with starlight, rest, and the distant order of heaven. His daughter stands near him, carrying the same calm certainty into every answer she gives. The island's silence seems natural around Ramandu, because even the wind appears to understand the importance of his repose. Night air settles over the harbour, and the clear water becomes almost black beneath the moon's reflection. The ship's lanterns glow along the deck, making small golden paths upon the surface below. Grass bends around the table in slow waves, although the branches overhead move in a different rhythm. The smell of bread has faded, but fruit remains sweet and cool beneath the starlight. A faint mineral scent rises from the stream, mingling with salt carried inland from the shore. The sleepers' faces are peaceful, and their breathing remains regular beneath the silver light. Beyond them, Ramandu's dwelling holds a dim warmth where the star rests after his celestial work. You hear the creak of the dawn treader's hull as the tide turns beneath her. Nothing in the harbour suggests danger, yet the eastern horizon seems deeper than the darkness surrounding it. The island offers rest without promising safety, and its quietness carries the weight of an approaching threshold. Caspian hears that only 3 companions may make the final journey beyond Aslan's table, and the knowledge weighs upon him more heavily than any storm. His first instinct is to continue with all who have shared the voyage, because friendship has become inseparable from his understanding of kingship. Yet the rule cannot be altered by rank, courage, or affection, and the swords must be placed upon the table before the final choice. You watch Caspian stand beneath the branches while the sea darkens beyond the harbour. He begins to recognize the limit of his own voyage, not as a failure, but as a boundary that must be accepted. His kingdom lies behind him, and the horizon ahead belongs to purposes no ruler can possess. Reapit Sheep remains committed to reaching the farthest eastern boundary, where the world is said to come nearest to the country beyond. The mouse's determination is quiet rather than loud, and it gives the gathering a firm centre. Around you, the travellers prepare for a departure that will divide their paths. Before dawn, the swords are carried from the ship towards Aslan's table, each blade rapped against the damp air. Metal touches leather with soft clicks, and footsteps pass over the grass without disturbing the sleeping lords. Caspian walks among the companions, speaking little, while Reapit Sheep keeps close to the weapons entrusted to him. The blades have different shapes and histories, yet their edges catch the same faint light beneath the paling sky. Ramandu's daughter leads the way towards the table, where the open ground appears washed with grey. The sleeping lords remain unchanged, with long beards resting across the cloth and hands lying beside untouched dishes. You sense that the three companions who continue beyond the table will carry more than swords into the eastern water. They will carry the memory of those left behind, the story of the seven lords, and the unanswered fate linked with the island's sleep. The dawn treader waits below, ready to bear them towards the world's end. Cool dawn spreads over the island, thinning the darkness above the harbor and turning the sea to pale blue. The anchored ship's shadow lengthens beneath her, while dew gathers upon the grass around the table. It shines like small beads beside the white cloth. The fruit appears fresh after the night, and the polished dishes hold the soft color of the approaching sunrise. Bread rests beneath the open sky, its crusts marked with tiny lines of gold. A breeze brings salt from the shore and the faint green smell of crushed grass beneath your feet. The sleeping lords remain enclosed within the same deep enchantment, untouched by dawn, birdsong, or the movement of people nearby. Revillion, Argos, and Mavramorn seem to belong equally to the table and to the passing years. Behind them, Ramandu's island rises quietly towards the morning, preserving its mystery beneath the clear air. Ahead, the eastern sea begins to separate itself from the horizon. Ramandu's daughter tells you once more that the quest must continue to the world's end, and her words settle gently over the assembled company. She does not describe the final waters in detail, because some places cannot be understood before they are reached. The path beyond the table will be made only by those permitted to carry the voyage farther east. Caspian accepts that his own journey must end before the last boundary, although acceptance does not remove the sadness of leaving. He will return with the dawn treader, with companions who have become almost like family, and with knowledge impossible to explain within ordinary maps. Reapit Sheep will continue, bearing his sword and his long-standing promise to seek the farthest eastern edge. Three companions stand ready beside him, their names held in the quiet uncertainty before departure. You see the choice become real as the others remain among the trees and beside the harbor. Ramandu's island now feels like a place of parting as well as rest. Morning light reaches the table in narrow strips, touching the sleeping lords without waking them. Revillion's beard gleams where the sun finds it, while Argos's sleeve remains shaded beneath a branch. Mavramorn's fingers lie close to a polished dish, and the dish reflects the sky in a small blue oval. The fruit gives off a cool sweetness, and the bread carries a warmer scent beneath the rising air. Grass bends under the movement of people, then slowly lifts again after they have passed. Salt remains upon the breeze, though the harbor below is quiet enough to show every ripple traveling across its surface. A robin lands on a nearby stone and watches the company before flying towards the trees. The island does not seem empty when the travelers begin to depart, because the table and its sleepers hold the center of its stillness. Behind you, the great feast remains prepared beneath the open sky. Before you, the path descends towards the dawn treader and the unknown waters. The final preparations continue without haste, and every movement seems measured against the peace of Ramandu's island. Sailors bring fresh water aboard, secure the remaining stores, and inspect the ropes darkened by night dew. Caspian gives instructions in a low voice, ensuring that the ship can leave without confusion when the tide begins to rise. Reapit Sheep checks his sword, adjusts his harness, and studies the eastern horizon with unwavering attention. The mouse's small figure appears almost delicate beside the tall masts, yet his purpose seems stronger than the timbers beneath him. You stand near the gangplank while the harbor brightens around the vessel. Clear water reveals drifting fragments of weed and the slow movement of silver fish above pale sand. The faint smell of grass reaches you from the slope, mingling with tar, rope, and salt. Above the island, the last stars fade one by one, while Ramandu's presence remains connected with the distant light. The quiet interval is ending, though the island keeps its silence. At the great table, the swords are placed upon the cloth, their blades lying parallel beneath the morning sky. Each weapon rests beside fruit, bread, and polished dishes, creating an unusual still life of steel and abundance. The metal reflects branches, clouds, and the pale faces of those who have gathered around it. No ordinary ceremony surrounds the act, and no music rises from the harbor below. Ramandu's daughter watches carefully, while Ramandu remains near his dwelling, resting after the long work of his celestial life. Caspian stands beside the table with the knowledge that he will not cross the final distance. Reapit Sheep remains near the eastern side, ready to make the last passage beyond the table when the appointed moment comes. The sleepers do not move, although the light now reaches the edges of their hands. You hear the small scrape of a sword against wood, followed by the softer sound of cloth settling beneath its weight. The island holds the scene in complete stillness, as though every blade has become a promise. Warmth begins to enter the day, though the air near the water remains cool against your face. The harbor brightens from grey to blue, and pale sand shines beneath the transparent shallows. The dawn treader moves slightly as the rising tide lifts her ropes, making the hull answer with a slow wooden groan. Along the grass, dew disappears beneath the sun, leaving darkened patches near stones and roots. Fruit glows red, yellow, and purple upon the table, and the polished dishes carry sharper reflections than before. The scent of salt is clean and steady, while the smell of grass becomes faint beneath the warming ground. Revilian, Argos, and Mavramorn remain asleep after 7 years, their strange rest continuing without visible change. You can still hear the stream beyond the trees, moving with the same patient sound it made when you first arrived. Ramandu's island offers no explanation for every mystery, but it gives each mystery a place to remain. Beyond the shore, the sea waits beneath a sky growing wider by the minute. Caspian takes leave of the companions who will continue eastward, and his farewell is quiet because loud words would not suit the island. He has heard the call of the world's end, yet he understands that his own voyage must turn back before reaching it. The limit of his journey is not measured by weakness, but by the boundary placed before the table and its appointed travelers. Reapit Sheep accepts the charge without hesitation, keeping his gaze fixed beyond the eastern water. The final missing lord remains linked with the enchanted sleep, and the fate of all 7 lords is still incomplete. Somewhere in the history of their quarrel, the White Witch's knife has left a shadow that the eastern journey may finally clarify. You watch the companions separate into those who remain and those who prepare to cross the last distance. The dawn treader waits below the slope, her sails folded and her decks quiet. Ramandu's daughter stands beside the path, holding the calm expression of someone who has seen many departures. The sun climbs over the island, making the water flash between the reeds and the lower branches. Clear shallows reveal pale sand, rounded stones, and the wavering shadows of fish beneath the anchored ship. The table remains laden under the open sky, though the white cloth now shines almost brightly enough to resemble snow. Long beards rest across the table, catching threads of sunlight that move slowly as the branches stir. The fruit has cooled in the night and now releases a gentle fragrance when the warmth reaches its skins. Bread crumbs lie near the sleeping hands, and a silver cup reflects the distant line of the harbor. Grass brushes against your ankles as you stand among the travelers, and its scent carries a quiet freshness. The air contains no storm, no thunder, and no sudden movement, only the faint pressure of the sea beyond sight. Ramandu's island appears peaceful enough to sleep upon indefinitely. Yet somewhere beyond the eastern horizon, waters unlike these are beginning to call. The chosen companions prepare to leave the table, while the others remain behind with Caspian and the sailors. Reapit Sheep fastens his sword securely, then turns once towards the sleeping lords before facing east again. His commitment to reaching the farthest eastern boundary has not diminished beside the table, and the knowledge of parting gives it greater weight. Caspian's face remains composed, although the stillness of his hands shows how much he wishes to continue. The three lords may yet be restored, and the hope of that restoration becomes part of the promise carried beyond the island. Ramandu's daughter explains that the journey will lead towards the world's end, where ordinary maps and familiar measures will no longer govern the sea. You feel the boards of the dawn treader beneath your feet as the first ropes are loosened. Around you, the island grows quieter, preserving the great table, the enchanted sleepers, and the memory of 7 years. The final eastward passage begins with no signal except the lifting of the sail. A light wind enters the harbour, moving across the clear shallows and raising small ripples beneath the ship. The dawn treader's sail opens gradually, catching the brightness of morning and drawing the vessel away from shore. Ropes slide through hands, wood creaks beneath tension, and the anchor rises dripping from the quiet water. The island's grass slopes remain green behind you, with Ramandu's table hidden partly among branches and morning light. You can still imagine fruit, bread, and polished dishes beneath the open sky, waiting beside the sleeping lords. Revillion, Argos, and Mavramorn remain at rest, their 7-year sleep undisturbed by departure. Ramandu's daughter stands upon the shore, and Ramandu rests beyond her, a star in human form beneath the ordinary sun. The harbour opens behind the ship, and the eastern water receives the dawn treader in slow, shining folds. Reapit Sheep watches the far horizon, prepared for the voyage beyond the table. Ramandu's island grows smaller, yet its quiet remains within the ship's memory. You sail eastward from Ramandu's island beneath a clear sky, carrying the swords, the stories, and the unanswered sleep of 3 forgotten lords. The table disappears beyond the curve of the shore, but its image remains precise within the morning light. Long beards rest across folded arms, polished dishes shine beneath branches, and fruit waits beneath the open air. The quarrel of the 7 lords belongs to the past, although its consequences still shape every mile of water ahead. Lord Root remains associated with the Dark Island, while the other missing lords are linked with the dragon and the sea. Caspian turns back towards Narnia, recognizing the limit of his voyage with a sorrow that does not weaken his judgment. Reapit Sheep continues towards the farthest eastern boundary, carrying his small sword and his immense certainty. Around you, the sea deepens in color, and the familiar coast becomes a thin line beneath the sky. The dawn treader moves beyond the quiet interval towards waters more mysterious than any yet crossed. Ahead lies the world's end, and behind you Ramandu's island rests beneath the sun. The first shadow of the Dark Island appears far ahead, where the eastern sky ought to meet the sea. It has no shape that you can name, yet it gathers upon the water with a patient, unnatural weight. The dawn treader moves towards it beneath a pale morning, and the brightness behind you seems suddenly distant. Ramandu's island has vanished beyond the curve of the world, while the Dark Island waits ahead, surrounded by darkness that belongs to no ordinary night. Caspian stands near the prow, watching the boundary widen. Around you, the sailors lower their voices, and even the ropes seem to creak more softly. The sea remains calm, but its calmness has become difficult to trust. No wind carries the shadow towards you, and no cloud explains its presence. It simply lies before the ship, a country of black water without a visible horizon. The air loses its warmth as the dawn treader approaches the shadow. Clear sunlight remains upon the deck for a little while, touching the ropes, mast, and brass fittings with a thin golden gleam. Beyond the bow, however, the light fades into thick grey-black mist. The line between sea and sky disappears first, leaving the ship suspended above water that seems to extend endlessly in every direction. Lanterns are lit along the rail, though evening has not yet come, and their small flames tremble in the still air. Each glow is swallowed by mist after a few yards, as though the darkness were drinking the light. Dampness settles upon your hands and face. The deck feels colder beneath your feet, and the tarred boards give back no warmth. Muffled voices travel across the deck from places you cannot see, becoming softer and stranger before they reach you. Beyond the first veil, the crew begins to hear sounds with no clear origin. A cry rises somewhere to starboard, then ends as suddenly as though a door has closed upon it. From beneath the bow comes a dull knocking, repeated 3 times against the hull. The sailors look over the rail, but the black water shows neither swimmer nor wreckage. Another voice calls a name from somewhere astern, and the sound is so familiar that one of the men nearly answers. Caspian orders the ship onward, though his face remains grave beneath the lantern glow. The dawn treader enters deeper into the darkness surrounding the island. Fear moves among the sailors more quickly than any wind. Each man remembers a private danger, and the darkness seems to know how to place those memories before him. The island is said to be a place where people encounter their worst fears, and the saying now feels like a warning spoken too late. Mist presses against the ship from every side, thick enough to soften the outlines of the mast. The lanterns shine as small amber circles, but their light is swallowed almost immediately, leaving the deck divided into islands of uncertain brightness. Water drips from the rigging, although no rain has fallen. The drops strike the planks with a measured sound, like fingers tapping at a locked room. Somewhere above, canvas shifts against the mast, although the wind has vanished. You breathe air that smells of salt, wet rope, and cold iron. The boards beneath you are slick and darkened, and the rail feels clammy under your palm. Voices continue to move across the deck, sometimes near your shoulder and sometimes far beyond the stern. Their words remain indistinct, while the spaces between them grow full of imagined meaning. The cries become more urgent as the ship proceeds. A sailor hears a child calling from the water, while another sees the outline of a burning house beyond the port side. Neither sight remains when the others turn to look. A third man drops his lantern after hearing footsteps behind him, though no person stands in the passageway. Fear takes the form of whatever the mind has kept hidden, and the dark island draws those forms into the air. Lord Roop has been trapped within this darkness for years, and his name passes from mouth to mouth as the crew searches through the obscurity. Caspian remembers that Roop was one of the lost lords, and he refuses to leave anyone behind if rescue remains possible. The sailors fear that the darkness may overwhelm the ship before they can return. Their hands tighten upon the oars, and their eyes turn repeatedly towards the unseen shore. Cold mist gathers in the folds of your clothing, while the deck beneath you seems to narrow into a single wet path. The ocean makes almost no sound, yet each movement of the hull sends a faint tremor through the soles of your feet. The darkness presses close enough to make the air feel heavy. Somewhere beyond the rail, a wave breaks with a soft inward sigh, and then the water becomes silent again. Lantern flames bend without any visible breeze, casting thin shadows across the ropes. The shadows appear to move after the light has steadied. A bitter scent rises from the sea, mingled with old leaves and extinguished fires. The mast disappears above you, its upper spars lost in grey vapor. You can hear breathing nearby, slow and careful, while the cries around the ship drift farther away. Nothing is sharp in this place, except the unease passing quietly from one person to another. Caspian gathers the sailors near the mast and speaks of entering the darkness to find Lord Roop and anyone else imprisoned there. His voice remains steady, although the surrounding mist seems to lean towards him. He believes that a king cannot pass by suffering simply because it has been hidden from sight. Several sailors protest, saying that no course can be trusted within the dark island and no compass points safely through fear. The ship itself has begun to shudder, as though unseen currents were turning beneath the keel. Edmund listens beside Lucy, while Eustace keeps close to the rail and watches the water with narrowed eyes. The cries continue around them, sometimes resembling sailors' voices, sometimes sounding like creatures calling from deep underground. Caspian does not withdraw his order. He asks for a boat, and the men begin preparing it with movements that are slow, reluctant, and obedient. The mist has become so dense that the nearest lantern resembles a moon seen through winter fog. Its reflection trembles upon the black water, breaking into fragments before vanishing beneath the hull. A small boat is lowered, and its ropes creak softly against the side of the Dawn Treader. The sound seems enormous in the stillness. You stand near the rail as Caspian looks into the darkness, waiting for some sign of Lord Roop. The sea gives back no face, hand, or floating piece of timber. Yet a voice rises close to the ship and cries that someone is drowning. Another voice answers from a different direction. The sailors recoil from the rail, certain that the sound has come from directly below them. The darkness has no visible edge, and the night within it seems deeper than the night above the world. At last, Caspian understands that courage alone cannot reveal a safe path through a place shaped by terror. A figure appears beside the boat, pale and uncertain beneath the mist. For a moment, the sailors believe that it is a drowned man standing upon the water. Then the figure grips the rope and begins to climb. His clothes hang heavily around him, and his face bears the drawn expression of someone who has forgotten the shape of ordinary daylight. Lord Roop emerges from the darkness after years of imprisonment, trembling as though he has just awakened from a fever. Lucy reaches towards him, while Edmund and Eustace help pull him over the rail. Roop says little at first. His eyes move across the deck, searching every corner for the forms that have followed him. Caspian asks how he came to be trapped, and Roop answers that the island does not hold bodies by chains. It holds minds by showing them fears they cannot endure. He has lived there for years, though time within the darkness has no reliable measure. Rain begins somewhere above the mist, but the drops do not reach the deck. They vanish into the vapor and leave the air smelling faintly of stone. Roop's hands are cold when Lucy wraps a cloak around his shoulders. His beard is tangled with salt, and his voice has the roughness of someone who has spoken only to shadows. You can see the strain around his eyes as he describes the island. Every person who enters it meets the shape of his or her worst fear, he says, and each fear speaks with the voice of truth. Some see creatures, some see grief, and some see themselves alone after every companion has disappeared. The darkness does not need walls, for terror provides its boundaries. Roop warns that the cries are often false, although the pain they awaken is real. He has heard his own name spoken by dead friends and followed their voices through passages that always return to the same shore. The deck grows quieter while Roop speaks, and the crew listens without moving. Around you, wet ropes rest in coils, glistening beneath the weak lanterns. A film of moisture covers the wooden rail, and beads of water gather upon the metal fastenings. The mist softens the smell of pitch until the ship seems less like a vessel and more like a room adrift in a dream. Somewhere in the rigging, a loose cord taps against the mast at irregular intervals. Its small sound becomes the only dependable rhythm. The black water lies beyond you, unseen except where it receives broken lantern reflections. Each flame appears to float separately in the vapor. Roop's cloak brushes against the boards as he shifts his weight, and the fabric makes a dry whisper. Far away, something calls across the sea, but the voice is too distant to carry words. Caspian orders the Dawn Treader turn towards open water. The sailors set their hands to the oars and push against a sea that offers no clear resistance. At first, the ship barely moves. Darkness clings to the hull, while cries continue from ahead and behind. One sailor sees a wall of ice rising before the bow. Another swears that a great eye has opened within the mist. Roop closes his eyes and tells them not to follow any voice. Edmund takes hold of a rope, Eustace braces himself against the mast, and Lucy remains beside Roop as the ship groans forward. The crew rows in silence, guided by the faint pull of water against the rudder. The dark island is no longer visible as land, yet its presence surrounds them. Fear presses upon every thought, and the sailors believe that the darkness may overwhelm the ship before the next stroke is completed. The oars enter the water with a low, soft plunge, rising again in the silverless darkness. You feel each stroke through the deck, a small pulse traveling beneath the boards. The air remains cold, but a warmer current begins to touch your cheek from somewhere ahead. Its arrival is so slight that you might mistake it for memory. Moisture drips from the sail, and the droplets gather at the edge before falling into the unseen sea. A lantern swings near the stern, painting a narrow arc of gold across the mist. For one moment, the light reaches farther than before, and you glimpse the sailors' faces gathered around it. They are pale, weary, and intent. Then the vapor closes again. The cries fade into a low murmur, and the murmur thins until only the creaking hull remains. Beneath the fear, the ship has found a current carrying it eastward. Roop directs Caspian towards a faint brightness that no one else can initially see. He says that the darkness has a border, though it pretends to stretch without end. The dawn treader follows his judgment, turning gradually while the oars maintain their slow rhythm. Behind the ship, voices rise in anger and sorrow, attempting to draw the crew back towards the island. No one answers them. The air becomes less bitter, and a pale gleam develops beyond the bow. At first it resembles another deception, one more false dream prepared by the dark island. Then the gleam touches the wet ropes and remains there. The sailors pull harder. The ship passes through a final thickness of mist, and clear sunlight falls suddenly across the deck. The warmth is startling after the cold darkness. Several men sink to their knees, while Roop turns towards the vanished island and watches it disappear without regret. Clear sunlight rests upon the dawn treader, drying the deck in broad, bright patches. The ropes warm beneath your fingers, and the tarred boards release the faint scent of pitch. Water shines along the rail like scattered glass. Behind you, the dark island is hidden by ordinary distance, though no shore can be seen. Ahead, the sea has resumed its blue color, and the sky stretches cleanly from horizon to horizon. The wind moves through the rigging with a gentle, familiar note. Sailcloth fills above you, and the ship settles into a steadier rhythm. The crew speaks quietly, testing the sound of their own voices in daylight. Roop sits near the mast, wrapped in dry clothing, while Lucy brings him warm broth. Sunlight reaches his face and makes him look older than the years he has described. The world feels solid again, yet the memory of black water remains beneath every conversation. The dawn treader continues towards the world's end, leaving the dark island farther behind with each measured day. Roop learns to sleep for short periods, though he wakes whenever a voice sounds unexpectedly near the cabin. Caspian keeps the ship on its eastern course, consulting the charts even when the coastlines have long disappeared. The sea grows calmer as they sail farther east, and its color changes beneath the widening sky. Blue gives way to green, green becomes pale gray, and then the water begins to reflect the heavens with unusual clarity. Edmund watches the horizon beside Lucy, while Eustace studies the wake and says very little. Reepitch stands at the prow, his small sword resting at his side and his attention fixed upon the distance. The voyage has passed beyond regions marked by ordinary maps. Ahead lies an ocean that seems less like a road than a vast, quiet threshold. Sunrise comes without clouds, and the eastern water takes on a color that seems to contain both metal and light. The sea brightens beneath the dawn treader until each wave appears edged with silver. Farther ahead, broader reaches glow with a muted golden tone, as though sunlight were shining from beneath the surface. The air becomes mild and clean, carrying only salt and the faint fragrance of warm wood. Waves lift the ship gently and lower it again without spray. Their quiet movement continues beneath the final dawn like breathing herd through a closed room. No birds cross the sky, and no distant land interrupts its clear emptiness. The mast casts a long shadow behind you, while the bow remains illuminated. Every polished fitting holds a small reflection, and the wet deck gleams like dark glass. The sea, bright as beaten silver, stretches towards the eastern boundary, calm enough to make time seem almost motionless. Roop speaks with Caspian about the country that may lie beyond the world's edge. He has no certain knowledge, for the dark island erased ordinary measures from his memory. Reapit Sheep listens nearby and says that the farthest east must be reached, whatever lies beyond it. Caspian reminds him that the ship has a company, a king, and a course, eventually leading back to Narnia. Reapit Sheep answers that his own course has always been farther east than any king's command. The words remain courteous, though the coming farewell is already present between them. Edmund understands that the voyage is beginning to separate the travellers. Lucy looks towards the shining sea with sadness, while Eustace stands with his hands upon the rail. The Dawn Treader enters a region where silver water and golden water meet in long, gentle bands. The boundary of the known world appears not as a cliff or wall, but as an immense country of extraordinary light. The ship glides across water so luminous that the wake seems made of powdered pearls. Beneath the surface, slow waves move in pale layers, each reflecting a different shade of dawn. Your face feels warm, although the breeze remains cool against your neck. The deck carries the quiet sense of salt, sun-heated rope, and cedar from the cabins. Every sound has softened. Oars rest against their mounts, sails barely stir, and the hull makes only a low murmur as it parts the bright sea. At the eastern horizon, the sky fades into whiteness rather than darkness. There is no sharp border between air and water, only a gradual joining of brightness. The silver sea continues beneath the ship, while distant patches of gold rise and vanish with the swell. Above you, the final dawn broadens without haste, touching the whole world with a peaceful and almost weightless glow. A small white shape appears upon the eastern water, moving towards the ship with an ease that seems independent of wind or current. At first, the travellers take it for foam carried over the waves. Then they see 4 slender legs beneath the pale body, and a lamb comes walking across the shining sea. Its wool is bright, but not dazzling, and its dark eyes hold a calm that makes the surrounding water appear still. The lamb approaches the Dawn Treader without fear. No one speaks for several moments. Reapit Sheep lowers his head, while Caspian remains standing near the bow. The creature turns towards Edmund and Lucy, and the sight awakens a memory they cannot fully name. Eustace looks from the lamb to the brilliant horizon, understanding that ordinary explanations have ended. The lamb steps close to the ship's side and lifts its face towards them. Within the quiet eastern waters, its presence feels older than the voyage and gentler than daylight. The lamb changes before you, not through any sudden movement, but through a deepening of what it has always been. Its small body seems to contain greater strength, and the brightness around it gathers into a living form. The travellers see Aslan standing upon the sea, his mane moving in a wind that touches nothing else. His paws rest upon the water as though the shining surface were solid ground. Lucy looks at him with tears in her eyes, while Edmund remains silent beneath the great lion's gaze. Aslan explains that the eastern sea is connected with his country, and that the waters at the world's end lead towards a place beyond the boundaries known to Narnia. His voice is quiet, yet it carries across the entire deck. The extraordinary light is not merely sunlight, and the silver water is not merely sea. It belongs to a country where the world's end is also a beginning. Reapit Sheep listens with complete attention, his small sword held upright at his side. The eastern air rests softly upon your face, carrying no smell of rain or distant land. The water beneath the Dawn Treader is almost transparent, though its surface shines with silver and gold. Gentle waves pass beneath the hull, making a sound like silk drawn slowly across wood. Aslan's reflection does not break when the sea moves around him. His mane holds the warm color of the rising sun, and the light along his shoulders appears to come from within. The deck is quiet enough for you to hear the faint creak of leather and the small movement of a rope against the mast. No gulls cry overhead, and no cloud crosses the open sky. The world seems to have become a single spacious room filled with clear warmth. Behind you, the known sea grows faint. Before you, the water continues towards the country connected with Urslan. Dawn remains suspended above the eastern horizon. Reapit Sheep asks whether he may continue eastward beyond the place where the Dawn Treader can travel. Urslan gives no command, for the choice already belongs to the mouse. Caspian steps forward and embraces him, holding the small figure with both arms. Edmund kneels to speak with Reapit Sheep at eye level, while Lucy presses her hand against his shoulder. Eustace, who once thought the mouse foolishly proud, now finds no words suitable for the farewell. Reapit Sheep says that he has sought the world's end since hearing of it in his earliest days, and he will not turn aside when the path lies open. His courage is not loud, and his certainty requires no proof. A small boat is prepared, though Reapit Sheep intends to travel alone across the bright water. He takes his sword, his courage, and the memory of his companions. Then he looks once more towards the east, where Urslan's country waits beyond the shining boundary. Light gathers along the sea as Reapit Sheep climbs down into the little boat. The vessel appears no larger than a leaf upon the luminous water. Its oars make barely a mark, and the current carries it eastward with gentle assurance. Caspian remains at the rail, watching until the small shape becomes a dark point against the gold. Reapit Sheep does not turn back. His solitary eastern course continues beyond the reach of the Dawn Treader, towards the place where water and sky seem to become one. Urslan watches him go, and the lion's expression holds something like approval. The ship's crew stands in silence, their faces turned towards the vanishing boat. Even the sea seems to pause around the farewell. At last, the point disappears into the extraordinary light. Caspian lowers his head, then orders the ship turn back towards Narnia, for he remains king and his kingdom lies westward. The Dawn Treader begins the return voyage beneath a gentler sun. Its sails fill from the west, and the ship turns away from the silver waters near the world's edge. Behind you, the eastern horizon remains bright, but the light gradually resumes the colors of the ordinary sky. Caspian gives instructions to the sailors, and their voices regain the practical rhythm of a working vessel. Roop watches the sea from a sheltered place, learning once more to trust the horizon. Edmund and Lucy speak together in low tones about Urslan, Reapit Sheep, and the country connected with the eastern sea. Eustace leans over the rail, no longer seeking treasure or danger beneath the waves. The voyage has become a memory while it is still unfolding. Behind the ship, the water closes over the wake. Ahead, distant routes lead towards Narnia, and the Dawn Treader follows them with steady purpose. Afternoon settles across the deck in long bands of amber light. The boards have dried completely, and they feel warm beneath your hands when you rest them upon the rail. A clean wind moves through the rigging, carrying the familiar smell of salt, canvas, and sun-warmed timber. The sea rolls in low blue folds, each crest breaking with a soft white line. From the stern, the wake stretches like a pale road into the distance. Roop sleeps in the shade, breathing evenly, while the sailors mend ropes and check the sails. Their movements create a quiet pattern of cloth, cord, and wood. Above them, the sky remains wide and cloudless. The black water without a visible horizon belongs now to memory, while this open sea offers measurable distance and ordinary weather. Evening approaches slowly, and the first stars appear before the last gold has left the western sky. Days pass with little disturbance as the Dawn Treader retraces the long eastern route. The dark island is not seen again, though its name remains in the sailors' conversations. Lord Roop grows stronger, and the years trapped within the darkness begin to loosen their hold upon him. He still avoids enclosed shadows, but he can stand beneath a cloud without believing that the island has returned. Caspian keeps his attention upon the course, remembering that kingship requires departure from even the most beautiful discoveries. Edmund carries the memory of the final eastern light, while Lucy remembers Aslan's face upon the sea. Eustace remembers Reepicheep's courage and says that the mouse was not foolish after all. The Dawn Treader sails westward through waters that become familiar by degrees. Islands reappear, then known stars, and finally the ordinary signs by which a traveller measures the world. Night comes softly over the returning ship, leaving a narrow path of moonlight across the waves. Lanterns hang from the mast and stern, their reflections trembling in the wake. The air is cool, though not bitter, and the wind carries a faint fragrance of wet rope. You hear the creak of the hull, the gentle slap of water against the sides, and the occasional murmur of a sailor keeping watch. Somewhere below, Roop sleeps without speaking. Caspian stands alone for a while beside the steering oar, his face turned towards the dark west. The sea is no longer threatening, but its depth remains beyond sight. Each wave rises and falls with patient regularity. Above the ship, stars gather in clear constellations, while the moon moves through a thin veil of cloud. The voyage continues beneath ordinary darkness, and ordinary darkness now feels like a form of safety. Eventually, the Dawn Treader reaches waters known to the people of Narnia. Familiar shores appear beyond the morning haze, green and brown, beneath a pale sky. The sailors recognize headlands, bays, and distant hills, naming each one with quiet satisfaction. Caspian stands at the bow as the ship enters its home harbor. The journey has changed everyone aboard, though not all changes can be described. Roop has returned from years of fear, and the crew has learned that courage does not always mean entering the darkness. Edmund, Lucy, and Eustace prepare to leave the ship, carrying memories that will remain strange in their own world. The Dawn Treader rests against the harbor timbers, its rope secured and its sails lowered. Around you, gulls circle above the roofs, and ordinary voices rise from the quay. The world has become solid, familiar, and gently limited once more. Morning light lies across the harbor stones, warming the rough surfaces where ropes have dragged through countless tides. The water inside the quay moves in small ripples, carrying reflections of masts, roofs, and pale clouds. Tar, salt, fish, and damp timber mingle in the air. Sailors walk across the deck with familiar purpose, gathering bundles and checking the last knots. Beyond the harbor mouth, the sea opens towards the west, blue beneath a calm sky. You can hear oars touching the water from a passing boat, followed by the soft call of a fisherman. Edmund, Lucy, and Eustace stand together near the rail, looking at the ship that carried them beyond maps. The Dawn Treader's boards hold the marks of storms, islands, and long days beneath the sun. Light moves across its side in a slow golden pattern. Nothing in the harbor resembles the dark island, the silver boundary, or Aslan's country, yet all remain within memory. The return to their own world comes through the painted doorway, where the sea and sky of Narnia have been held inside a frame. Edmund, Lucy, and Eustace stand before it with the quiet reluctance of travelers leaving a familiar shore. Caspian remains behind, because his place is with Narnia and the kingdom entrusted to him. Roop also stays among the returned lords and sailors, his years of darkness becoming part of the voyage history. Edmund touches the frame, and the painted water seems to tremble beneath his hand. Lucy looks once towards the harbor, where the Dawn Treader lies in morning light. Eustace says farewell without concealing his sadness. Beyond the doorway, their own world waits with its rooms, roads, and ordinary weather. The boundary closes gently, leaving no wound in the air. The painted sea becomes still, and the last eastern brightness fades into the quiet of the frame. Within the familiar room, the painted picture rests once more upon the wall. Its colors appear subdued after the extraordinary light at the world's edge. You can see the little ship upon its sea, the distant shore, and the sky painted above them. No mist moves within the frame, and no cry crosses the quiet room. The surface is smooth beneath the light from the window. Dust rests along the lower edge, while the wooden frame holds the picture in its ordinary place. Outside, evening settles over the streets, and a faint wind touches the glass. The memory of the dawn treader remains bright, though the voyage has ended. The dark island lies far away in the history of another world. The silver sea, the lamb, and Aslan's country remain beyond every familiar horizon. Somewhere in the east, Reapit Sheep continues alone. Somewhere behind him, quiet waves move beneath the final dawn.